Cole Harrison dropped the gutted elk carcass at the front gate of a man he had never met, spat into the dirt beside it, and laughed loud enough for the whole valley to hear. "Welcome to Montana," he called out toward the dark cabin. "This mountain has belonged to me for 20 years, soldier boy. Sign hangs where I say it hangs." He climbed into his truck and left the animal rotting in the sun as a message. He did not know that the quiet man watching from the trees had spent 18 years learning exactly how to wait. Before we go further, please subscribe to the channel and stay with this story all the way to the end. And leave a comment telling me what city you are watching from so I can see how far this story has traveled. The gate had been open for 11 days when Ethan Walker first saw what Cole Harrison thought of him. He had been in the back pasture that morning, walking the fence line, with a coil of wire over his shoulder and a pair of pliers in his back pocket, doing the slow, patient work of a man who had nowhere else to be. He was 52 years old. He had knees that clicked when the weather turned. He had a shoulder that had been rebuilt twice by Navy surgeons and a right ear that rang faintly in silence, which was most of the time now. He had bought 700 acres of Montana mountain with almost every dollar he had ever saved, and for 11 days he had believed he was going to be left alone. Then he came around the bend of the county road and smelled it before he saw it. He stopped walking. He stood there for a long moment with the wire on his shoulder and the sun on his neck, and he did not move at all the way a man stands when he is deciding whether he is going to lose his temper. The bull elk lay across his gate. It had been shot, gutted badly, and left. The head was still attached, which told him something. A poacher who wanted meat took the meat. A poacher who wanted a trophy took the head. This animal had been killed for neither. It had been killed to be left where he would find it. Ethan set the wire down on the grass. He walked closer. He crouched beside the animal and looked at the entry wound, and then at the tracks in the soft dirt, and then at the tire prints that came in from the north and went back out the same way. "All right," he said quietly. "All right." That was all he said. He went back to the cabin, got his phone, walked the 200 yards up the ridge where he could catch a single bar of signal, and called the county. The dispatcher put him through to a deputy who sounded like he was eating lunch. "You got a what on your gate?" "An elk," Ethan said. "Bull, 6 point. Somebody shot it, opened it up, and dumped it at my entrance." "Huh." A pause. Chewing. "You sure it didn't just die there?" "It has a bullet hole in it." "Well," the deputy sighed like the whole thing was already exhausting him. "You out on the old Kessler place?" "That's right." "Yeah." Another pause. "Look, mister, I'll write it up, but I'll be honest with you. We're 2 hours out, and we got a stolen tractor and a domestic in Culver Creek. You want me to send somebody, I can send somebody in a few days. I'd like it documented." "It'll be documented." "Thank you." "Mr. Walker." "Yes." The deputy hesitated, and when he spoke again, his voice had lost the boredom and picked up something else, something more careful. "You just moved in 11 days ago." "Yeah," the deputy said. "Okay, well, welcome to the county." He hung up before Ethan could ask him what he meant by that. Ethan stood on the ridge with the phone in his hand and looked out over the country he now owned. Timber running up the shoulders of the mountain. 2 creeks. A meadow where the elk came down at dusk. Cliffs in the north that dropped 400 feet into a drainage nobody had walked in years. It was the most beautiful thing he had ever paid for. In 11 days, and somebody had put a dead animal on his doorstep like a warning nailed to a barn door. He went back down and spent 4 hours dragging the carcass off the road with a chain in his truck, and then he burned what he could and buried the rest. And when he was done, his hands were shaking, and it was not from the work. He knew that feeling. He had not felt it in a long time. He had come here specifically so he would never feel it again. The next morning, he drove into town. Silver Fork had one main street, a hardware store, a feed store, a bar, a diner, a church, and a gas station that sold worms in a cooler by the door. Ethan parked outside the hardware store and went in for fence staples and got something he had not gone in for at all. The man behind the counter was in his 70s, with white stubble and reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. His name tag said Walt. "You're the fella bought the Kessler place," Walt said. It was not a question. "Ethan Walker." "Walt Jennings." They shook. Walt's hand was like a piece of dried oak. "How you finding it?" "Quiet." "Uh-huh. Walt rang up the staples slow the way old men do when they want to keep a conversation alive. You meet your neighbors yet? I don't think I have any. Oh, Walt said, you got one. Ethan waited. Walt set the box down and leaned on the counter with both forearms. Son, he said, how much did the realtor tell you about that property? She told me the roof was new and the well was good. She tell you why it has sat on the market 4 years? She said it was remote. Walt laughed one dry syllable with no humor in it at all. It's remote, he agreed. It's also been Cole Harrison's private hunting ground since before you knew this state existed. Ethan put his wallet back in his pocket without taking anything out of it. Who is Cole Harrison? Outfitter. Walt said the word the way a man says the name of a disease he has learned to live with. Runs guided hunts, charges city money, $20,000 a head for a guaranteed bull, and he guarantees it, and you ever wonder how a man guarantees an animal? He hunts where the animals are. He hunts where the animals are, Walt said, whether or not it's his. Ethan felt something settle in his chest, not anger, something colder and more useful than anger. Somebody dumped an elk on my gate yesterday, he said. Walt closed his eyes for a second. Yeah, he said, that'd be him. You sound sure? I sound sure because he did the same damn thing to Ray Kessler in '09. Except with Ray, it was a mule deer, and Ray was 78 years old with a bad hip and no help. Walt straightened up. Ray sold. 4 years later, family's still bitter about it. And nobody stopped him. Who's going to stop him? Walt spread his hands. Sheriff's a good man, but he's got 4 deputies for 2,000 square miles. Fish and Game's got 1 warden, and he's 61, and he's got the same problem. Cole's got money, he's got lawyers, and he's got half the town on his payroll one way or another. My own nephew guides for him in the fall. I don't like it. I got a mortgage. So everyone knows. Everyone knows. And everyone lives with it. Walt looked at him for a long moment. Mr. Walker, he said, let me tell you the part that matters. He's not just mean. He's mean and he's patient, and he's never once been made to pay for anything in his life. That's a particular kind of animal. You push him, he don't back up. He escalates, and he don't do it himself. He sends boys who think it's funny. I appreciate the warning. You're not going to take it. I paid for that land, Ethan said. Every dollar I have is in that dirt. Walt sighed and pushed the box of staples across the counter. Then keep your gate locked, he said, and keep a camera on it and write everything down. Everything. Dates, times, plates, because if it ever gets in front of a judge, and I pray for you that it does, the only thing that's going to save you is paper. Ethan picked up the box. Walt, yeah. Why are you telling me this? The old man took his glasses off his forehead and cleaned them on his shirt, which gave him something to do with his hands. Because Ray Kessler was my friend, he said, and I didn't tell him a damn thing, and I've thought about it every year since. Ethan drove home the long way down along the river past the turnoff where a hand-painted sign read Harrison Outfitters Guided Hunts Book Now, and he slowed, but he did not stop. That night, he sat on the porch with a cup of coffee going cold in his hands, and he did not sleep. He had been through this before. Not this exact thing, but this shape. A man who took what he wanted because nobody had ever told him no in a way he believed. Ethan had spent 18 years around men like that, in places with harder names. He had learned that they were all the same in one particular way. They read patience as fear. He thought about Marcus. He did not want to. It came anyway the way it always did around 2 in the morning. Marcus Bell, 29, laughing with his mouth full, saying, you're going to buy a mountain walk. What in the hell does a man do on a mountain? And Ethan saying nothing. That's the whole point. And Marcus saying, that sounds boring as hell, brother. And Ethan saying, God, I hope so. Marcus had 11 days left when he said that. Nobody knew it. Nobody ever knows it. Ethan poured the cold coffee off the porch and went inside and lay down and stared at the ceiling until the windows went gray. 3 days later, they came in daylight. He heard the trucks before he saw them, 2 of them running the old logging road that cut through the northwest corner of his property. He was splitting wood by the shed. He set the maul down, wiped his hands on his jeans, and walked. It took him 25 minutes to get up there on foot. He did it quietly, not because he was sneaking, but because that was simply how he had learned to move, and he had never unlearned it. There were 4 of them at the fence. One was cutting it. Afternoon, Ethan said. All four spun around. The one with the wire cutters dropped them. They were young, three of them, and the fourth was maybe 40, with a chew tin ring worn white into his back pocket. They wore new camo, and they carried rifles that cost more than Ethan's truck. "Jesus," said the one who had dropped the cutters. "Where'd you come from?" "I live here." "You live here?" The 40-year-old laughed. "Buddy, this is the Harrison lease." "There's no lease," Ethan said. "This is deeded property. Mine. That fence you're cutting is mine. Those signs every 300 feet are mine. And you're on the wrong side of all of it." Nobody moved. "You got a name," the older one said. "Ethan Walker." "Rick Dunn." He did not offer a hand. "Look, Mr. Walker, I don't know what the realtor told you, but Cole's been running clients through this corner for 20 years. There's an understanding." "Not with me. It's an understanding with the mountain." "The mountain doesn't hold title," Ethan said. "I do." One of the young ones snorted. Rick Dunn tilted his head and studied Ethan the way a man studies a fence post he is thinking about pulling. He took in the gray in the beard, the sun lines, the old boots, the way the man stood with his weight even and his hands loose and empty. Something in his face changed slightly. Not fear, but a small recalculation, the kind a man makes without knowing he has made it. "You gonna do something about it," he said. "I already have, Ethan said. "There's a camera on that fence post behind you. There's another one on the ridge. I've got your faces, your plates, in about 9 minutes of you cutting a fence, which is criminal mischief. I'm going to send it to the sheriff this afternoon and to Fish and Wildlife and to my attorney." The young one who had dropped the cutters looked up at the fence post. "There's no camera on that post," he said. "No," Ethan agreed. "There isn't. It's in the tree 40 feet behind it, and it's been running since you got out of the truck." Nobody said anything for a good 4 seconds. Then Rick Dunn laughed, but it came out a half-second late, and everybody there heard the half-second. "All right," he said. "All right, tough guy. We're going. Fix the fence first." "What?" "You cut it," Ethan said. "Fix it." "I ain't fixing your fence." "Then I'll add the repair to the complaint. $240 receipts attached." Ethan's voice never went up, not once. "Up to you, Mr. Dunn, but I'd like you to understand something before you drive off. I'm not going to fight you. I'm not going to threaten you. I'm going to write down every single thing you do on this property for as long as it takes, and one day, a man in a courtroom is going to read it all of it at once." Rick Dunn stared at him. "Cole ain't gonna like this." "I imagine not." "He's gonna come see you." "I'll put coffee on." They left the fence cut. Ethan fixed it himself before dark, and then he sat down at the kitchen table with a spiral notebook and wrote the date, the time, the number of individuals, the descriptions, the plate numbers, the tools, observed the words spoken. He wrote it plain and dry, with no feeling in it at all, because he had learned a long time ago that feeling is the first thing a lawyer will use against you. Then he closed the notebook and sat there with his hand flat on the cover. "Just paper," he said out loud to nobody. "Keep it on paper." Cole Harrison came 4 days later. He drove up in a black crew cab with a company logo on the door, and he did not stop at the gate. He drove around it through the ditch and up the 2-track to the cabin, and he parked in the yard like a man parking at his own house. He got out smiling. He was 55 or so thick through the chest silver at the temples, wearing a vest that had been expensive with the easy, loose posture of a man who had been the biggest thing in the room for 30 straight years. Ethan came out onto the porch and did not come down the steps. "Ethan Walker," Cole said, arms wide. "Sorry it took me so long. Been guiding a group out of Dallas." "Mr. Harrison." "Cole, please." He came up to the bottom of the steps and put a boot on the first one, which was the kind of thing men do without thinking, and which is never actually without thinking. "Beautiful spot you got. Just beautiful. Ray never did a thing with it. You drove around my gate." Cole looked back at the gate as if noticing it for the first time. "Was it locked?" "It was closed." "Ah, hell," he laughed. "Habit. 20 years of habit. I apologize." "All right. Look." Cole put his hands together, businesslike, now warm and reasonable. "Let's you and me not get off wrong. I heard about the fence. That was Rick, and Rick's got a mouth on him, and I've talked to him. That won't happen again." "Good. Now here's what I'd like to propose." Cole smiled wider. "I run about 40 clients a season. Some of my best country runs right up your north drainage. Now I got no problem paying a man for what's his. I'd like to lease hunting access. 15,000 a season paid up front cash if you want it. That's real money for a fella just getting started out here, and it costs you nothing but a signature. Ethan looked at him. No, thank you. Cole blinked. Say again. No, thank you. Son. The warmth stayed in the voice, but something else moved behind it like a fish under ice. That's $15,000. I understand. For land you ain't even using. I'm using it. For what? It's a home for animals, Ethan said. That's what I'm using it for. Cole stared at him. Then he laughed, genuinely delighted, and shook his head. A home for animals, he repeated. Well, I'll be damned. You one of them. One of what? Wildlife people. Conservation people. He said it like a man naming a mild disease. Come out here from somewhere else and tell folks who've lived here their whole lives how it's going to be. I'm not telling anybody anything, Ethan said. I'm telling you no. The delight drained out of Cole Harrison's face slowly the way water leaves a cracked bucket. 20, he said. No. 25 and I'll fix your road. Mr. Harrison. Cole. Mr. Harrison. Ethan came down one step, just one. I'm going to say this once plainly because I think you're a man who hears plain better than polite. That country is closed. It's closed to you. It's closed to your guides. It's closed to your clients. Every gate stays locked. Every trespass gets filed. I don't want your money and I don't want trouble, and I'd honestly rather never see you again. Cole Harrison's jaw worked. You know how many men have told me no out here, he said. No. None. He held up a finger. In 31 years. Not the Kesslers, not the Forest Service, not the county, not one man. Then this is new for both of us. Something ugly flickered across Cole's face and was gone so fast that most people would have missed it. Ethan did not miss it. You served, Cole said suddenly. Yes. Figured. Something about you. He nodded slowly. Army. Navy. Navy. Cole smiled without any warmth in it now. Well, that's fine. That's real fine. My daddy was Army. He stepped back off the porch and looked around the yard at the woodpile at the truck, at the single light burning in the kitchen window. You up here alone, Ethan? Ethan did not answer. Just asking, Cole said. Big country, long winters. Man alone up here, he ought to have somebody know where he is. Is that a concern? It's a fact. Cole opened his truck door. There's 100 ways to get hurt on a mountain. Fall, weather, bad water, bear. You'd be amazed what this country does to people who think they understand it. I'm sure I would. Cole climbed in and started the engine, and then leaned out the window with his elbow on the frame, all easy again, all neighborly. Season opens in 5 weeks, he said. My clients pay up front, non-refundable, just so you know what's riding on this. That's not my problem. No, Cole agreed, not yet. He backed out through the yard, ran over the corner of Ethan's flower bed, and drove away. Ethan stood on the porch until the dust settled. Then he went inside, sat at the table, opened the notebook, and wrote it all down. Every word. He had a memory for conversation that had been trained into him in rooms where getting a word wrong could kill people. And he wrote it clean, and at the bottom he wrote, stated implied threat to personal safety. Non-specific, deniable. He looked at that last line for a long time. Then he underlined the word deniable. 2 nights later, something moved in the yard at 3 a.m. Ethan woke the way he always woke, all at once, with no groggy middle. He lay perfectly still and listened. Boot on gravel, 2 of them, whispering badly. He got up without turning on a light. He went to the window at the side of the cabin, not the front, and looked out through the gap in the curtain and saw 2 shapes at his truck. He did not go out. That was the hardest thing he had done in 10 years, and he did it, and he stood there in the dark with his heart going like a young man's and his hands opening and closing, and he did not go out that door, because Walt Jennings had said one thing that stuck. Paper. Paper is what saves you. He picked up his phone instead and filmed them through the glass, and even in the dark you could hear one of them say, clear as anything. Cole said, just the tires, man, don't be stupid. 4 tires. All 4, slashed clean across the sidewalls, which is not something a man does to send a message about hunting rights. It is something a man does to make sure you cannot leave. In the morning, Ethan walked the 2 miles to the county road and got a signal and called the sheriff's office. And this time somebody came. Sheriff Daniel Brooks was 6'2" and about 60 with a gray mustache and eyes that did not miss much. He walked around the truck twice, crouched by the front tire, and stood back up with a grunt. "That's a hunting knife," he said. "Yes." "You got video?" "Some. It's dark. You can't ID faces." Ethan handed him the phone. "You can hear a name." Brooks watched it. He watched it a second time. Then he handed the phone back and let out a long breath through his nose. "You can hear a first name," he said. "Cole is a common name." "Not around here it isn't." "No," Brooks agreed. "Not around here it isn't." They stood there in the yard. "Sheriff, I'd like to ask you a direct question." "Go ahead." "Are you going to be able to do anything about this man?" Daniel Brooks did not answer right away, and Ethan respected him for that. A liar answers fast. "I'm going to tell you the truth," Brooks said, "because I think you'll spot anything else. In the last 6 years, I have written up Cole Harrison 11 times. Trespass, wildlife violations, one assault that got pled down to nothing. Every single time it dies at the county attorney's office. Every time." "Why?" "Money," Brooks said simply. "He brings $4 million a year into a county that don't have $4 million. He's got a lawyer in Billings who eats county attorneys for lunch. And the last 2 witnesses who agreed to testify against him changed their minds, and one of them sold his place and moved to Idaho, and I never could prove why." Ethan absorbed that. "So you're telling me not to file?" "No." Brooks looked at him hard. "I'm telling you to file everything. Every single time. I want a stack on my desk so tall that when the right day comes, I can drop it in front of a judge and he can't pretend he don't see it. But I am also telling you that day may be a long way off, and between here and there, you are going to be on that mountain by yourself." "I've been by myself before." "I know you have." Brooks let that sit. "I ran your name, Mr. Walker. That's my job." It came back thin. "Thin how?" "Thin like a man whose records are mostly somewhere I can't get to them." The sheriff's eyes were stared. 18 years, and about 9 of them just aren't there. Now, I've been doing this a long while, and there's 2 kinds of men with holes in their file. There's the kind hiding from something, and the other kind. The other kind had a job the government don't write down. Ethan looked out at the timber. "I fixed fences today," he said. "That's the job I have now." Brooks nodded slowly. "Fair enough." He walked toward his cruiser, then stopped and turned around. "Ethan, one more thing and then I'll leave you be." "Sir." "Cole Harrison has never in his life had a man stand still in front of him." Brooks put his hat on. "He's got no idea what to do with that. It's going to make him crazy. And a man like that, when he goes crazy, he don't get smarter, he gets bigger. He'll come at you harder than the thing deserves, and he'll do it in front of witnesses, and if you keep your hands in your pockets while he does it, that is the day you win. And if I don't keep my hands in my pockets, then he wins," Brooks said, "and he'll have your mountain by spring." He drove off. Ethan spent the next 2 weeks doing what he had said he would do. He bought 11 more cameras and put them where a man would not look for a camera, which is not the obvious place and not the clever place, but the boring place low and off to the side where the eye slides past. He rebuilt 400 yards of fence. He replaced every sign with metal ones bolted through, and he photographed each one with a newspaper in the frame for the date. He got a lawyer in Missoula on retainer and sent her a package every Friday. He drove to Helena and sat down for 2 hours with a fish and wildlife supervisor and left copies of everything. And he found the dog. She came out of the north drainage on a Tuesday, some kind of shepherd cross so thin her hips looked like coat hangers with a collar grown into her neck and a shot-up ear. She would not come closer than 30 feet for 6 days. On the 7th, she took a piece of chicken out of his hand and then bolted like she had done something wrong. He named her Ruby. By the end of the month, she slept on the porch and then inside the door and then at the foot of his bed, and Ethan Walker discovered something that surprised him, which was that he talked out loud now. He had not talked out loud in 4 years. "You know what he wants," he told her one evening, scratching under the ruined ear. "He wants me to swing on him. That's all this is. Every bit of it. He wants one bad 10 seconds. Ruby thumped her tail. "Yeah," Ethan said. "Well, he's going to wait a long time." The season opened on a Saturday. By the following Wednesday, Ethan had documented 9 separate trespasses, 4 dead animals on his property, 2 out of season, one of them, a cow elk, shot and left entirely, which is not hunting by any definition anybody has ever used. He filed all of it. On Thursday, a Harrison guide named Tyler Voss stood on the far side of Ethan's fence with a client from Chicago and screamed at him for 11 minutes while Ethan stood there with his arms at his sides and said nothing but, "You're on the wrong side of the fence." On Friday, someone drove a truck through his gate, not around, through. On Saturday, Cole Harrison called him on his own phone, which meant Cole had gotten the number from somebody, and said in a voice that was almost gentle, "You have cost me $81,000, Ethan. I want you to sit with that number." "I'm sitting with it. Do you have any idea what I'll do to get $81,000 back?" "I imagine you'll try to buy me out." "I don't buy men out," Cole said. "I wait for them to leave." And on Sunday morning, Ethan came out at first light to feed, and Ruby did not come off the porch. She was breathing wrong. There was foam at her mouth and her legs were not working, and there was a piece of raw hamburger in the yard with a green crust on it that Ethan Walker recognized from 20 feet away. He drove 90 miles to the nearest emergency vet with a dog wrapped in his coat on the passenger seat and one hand on her ribs to feel her breathing, and he talked to her the entire way, the whole 90 miles in a low, steady voice, saying her name over and over, saying, "Easy, girl, easy, we're almost there." Easy now, the way he had once talked to a 29-year-old man in the back of a helicopter who had already stopped hearing him. The vet met him at the door. At 2 in the afternoon, she came out into the waiting room, and Ethan stood up before she could say it, and she said it anyway. "She's alive." Ethan sat back down. He sat down hard. "Another 20 minutes and she wouldn't be," the vet said. "It was rat poison, a lot of it wrapped in meat. That's not an accident." "No," Ethan said, "it isn't." She looked at him for a moment with the particular weariness of somebody who has been in this county her whole life. "I have to ask," she said, "do you know who did it?" Ethan Walker sat in that plastic chair with his hands hanging between his knees and his shirt stiff with dried foam, and he looked at the floor for a long time. And in his chest, something that had been quiet for 4 years turned over and opened its eyes. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "I know exactly who did it." The drive home took 3 hours because Ethan Walker did not go home. He got as far as the junction where the highway split, one road running back up toward the mountain and the other running south toward the river bottom, where a hand-painted sign said Harrison Outfitters, and he sat at that stop sign with the engine running for 4 minutes and 11 seconds. He knew it was 4 minutes and 11 seconds because he watched the clock on the dash the entire time. He made himself watch it. It was the only thing he could think of to do. There was nobody behind him. There was nobody coming the other way. There was just a man in a truck at an empty intersection at 4:30 in the afternoon with dried foam on his shirt sleeve, deciding what kind of man he was going to be for the rest of his life. He thought about how long it would take. 11 minutes to Cole Harrison's place. He had already driven past it twice, and he knew the layout without meaning to know it, because that was a thing his brain did whether he asked it to or not. Gravel turnaround, shop building on the left, office trailer, the house set back with a porch light that stayed on all day, which meant nobody in that house had checked a light bulb in a year, which meant nobody in that house paid attention to small things. 11 minutes there. Cole would be in the shop this time of day. He would not even have to raise his voice. Ethan Walker put both hands on the wheel and pressed until his knuckles went white, and he said out loud in the empty cab, "Marcus." That was all, just the name. Then he took his foot off the brake and turned right north toward the mountain and drove home with the windows down and the cold air roaring through the truck because he needed something loud. The cabin was dark and empty, and there were no dog nails on the floorboards, and that was the worst part, the sound that was missing. He stood in the doorway with his hand still on the frame and did not turn the light on for a long minute. Then he sat down at the table, opened the notebook, and wrote it down. Sunday, 6:40 a.m., dog poisoned, rat poison in raw hamburger placed in yard within 20 feet of porch. Meat not from my kitchen, delivered between 11 p.m. Saturday and 6 a.m. Sunday. Camera 4 covers that ground. Check camera 4. He put the pen down. He got up, drove the 400 yards to where camera 4 sat low in the crotch of a lodgepole pine and came back 25 minutes later with the card and his jaw set like a man carrying something he did not want to open. The footage was 11 seconds long. A man in a hooded sweatshirt walking fast, head down, coming from the tree line. He tossed something underhand into the yard. He turned. He walked back out of frame. You could not see his face. But at second 7, he passed close enough to the lens that the camera caught the back of his right hand, and on that hand was a tattoo. And the tattoo was a bull elk with a 7-point rack. And Ethan Walker had seen that tattoo 11 days earlier on the hand of a 23-year-old guy named Kyle Merrick, who had stood behind Rick Dunn at the cut fence and looked at his boots the entire time. Ethan sat back in his chair. Huh, he said. He watched it 4 more times. Not for the tattoo, for the walk. Because a man who is doing what he wants to do walks one way, and a man who is doing what he has been told to do walks another way, and Kyle Merrick came out of those trees the way a boy walks toward a woodshed. Ethan copied the file 3 times. One to a drive, one to his lawyer in Missoula, one emailed from the ridge where the signal came in at 6 the next morning, and then he called Sheriff Daniel Brooks and said, I've got a face, or close to it. Brooks came at 9. He watched the 11 seconds twice, then a third time, and then he sat back in the kitchen chair and rubbed his mustache with the flat of his hand. Kyle Merrick, he said. You know him. I've known him since he was 6. His mother cleaned the courthouse for 9 years. Brooks looked at the screen again. That is the dumbest kid in this county, and I mean that with affection. He can't tie his own boots without instructions. Then somebody gave him instructions. Yeah. Brooks let out a breath. Yeah, somebody did. Can you arrest him? I can arrest him today. Brooks tapped the table with 2 fingers. And I'll get him for animal cruelty, and he'll plead it down and pay a fine and be back guiding in 2 weeks, and Cole Harrison will not have his name written on one single piece of paper. That's what happens if I do it today. Ethan looked at him. And if you don't do it today? If I don't do it today, Brooks said slowly, I go talk to a scared 23-year-old with no lawyer and no money, and a mother who cleans the courthouse, and I ask him who bought the hamburger. Will he tell you? He might. Brooks stood up. He's a coward, Mr. Walker. That's not an insult, it's a fact, and a coward is the most useful witness God ever made if you catch him early enough. It's the brave ones that'll die on a lie. He put his hat on and stopped in the doorway. Your dog gonna live? They think so. Good. Brooks looked out at the yard. Because if she hadn't, I'd have had to worry about you, and I've got enough to worry about. You don't have to worry about me. Uh-huh, the sheriff said. You sat at that junction, didn't you? Ethan did not answer. Yeah, Brooks said. Everybody does. The ones I bury are the ones who turned left. He got into his cruiser and drove out. Ruby came home on Wednesday. She was 12 pounds lighter, and she moved like an old woman, and for 2 days she would not eat out of a bowl, only out of his hand, and every time a truck went by on the county road 2 miles off, she went rigid and pressed against his leg until it passed. That did something to Ethan Walker that the slashed tires had not done, and the elk on the gate had not done. He sat on the porch step and with his hand on her ribs on Thursday evening, and he said very quietly, I'm not going to let anybody touch you again. And then he said, because he was a man who had learned to be careful even with promises made to a dog, I'm going to do it the right way. It's going to take longer. I'm sorry about that. She put her chin on his knee. Kyle Merrick came up the mountain on Saturday morning at 10:15. He came alone in a beat-up Ranger with a cracked windshield, and he stopped at the gate and got out and stood there with his hands jammed in his pockets, and he did not open the gate, and he did not honk. He just stood there. Ethan watched him from the porch for 2 full minutes. Then he walked down. The kid was pale. He had not shaved, and it was not the kind of not shaving that a man does on purpose. His hand was shaking on the top rail of the gate, and on the back of that hand was a bull elk with a 7-point rack. Mr. Walker, he said. Kyle. The kid flinched at his own name. Sheriff came to my mom's house, he said. Wednesday. Sat in the kitchen. Asked me where I bought hamburger. Did you tell him? No, sir. Why not? Kyle Merrick's mouth worked and nothing came out for a second. Because I got a brother, he said finally. He's 19. He drives truck for Cole in the fall, and that's how he pays for school. And Cole knows that, and Cole told me he knows that. Ethan leaned on the gate. When did he tell you that? Wednesday night, Kyle said. 20 minutes after the sheriff left my mom's house. 20 minutes, Mr. Walker. There it was. Ethan felt it land. Somebody in that county had picked up a phone within 20 minutes of Daniel Brooks walking out of a widow's kitchen, and it had not been Kyle, and it had not been the widow. Who else was there? He asked. Just my mom, and the sheriff, and his deputy. Which deputy? Kyle looked up. Deputy Prine, he said. Ethan did not react. He had gotten extremely good at not reacting a long time ago. Kyle, he said, why did you drive up here? The kid's face came apart a little. Because I've been sick, he said. Since Sunday, I ain't slept. I keep seeing that dog. His voice cracked in the middle of the word dog, and he hated it. You could see him hating it. I got a dog. I got a healer. And I did that, and Cole handed me the meat in a Ziploc and said, it's just to make a point. He said it'll make her sick a couple days, he said. It ain't gonna kill her. And I'm dumb, Mr. Walker. Everybody says I'm dumb, and they're right because I believed him. How much did he put in it? I don't know. It was green all through. It was like, he swallowed. It was like half the box. Ethan let out a long breath through his nose. Is she alive? Kyle asked. She's on my porch. The kid put both hands over his face and stood there at the gate of a man he had wronged and cried like a child, and Ethan Walker stood 4 feet away on the other side of that gate and let him do it and did not say it's all right because it was not all right. When Kyle got himself back, he wiped his face on his sleeve. I'll pay the vet, he said. It'll take me a while. I got about 600. It was 1,100. I'll pay it. All right. Kyle nodded and nodded again and then stood there because he had not said the thing he had actually driven up to say. Ethan waited. There's a meeting, Kyle said. Tonight at the shop. Cole and Rick and Tyler and Boone. He told me not to come. He's never told me not to come. Do you know what it's about? I know he's been on the phone with a lawyer in Billings twice this week, and he came out of the office and put his fist through the drywall. Kyle's jaw tightened, and I know Rick asked him what the plan was, and Cole said, we're going to make the mountain do it. Ethan went very still. Say that again. He said we're going to make the mountain do it. Kyle shook his head. I don't know what that means. I asked Boone, and Boone laughed at me. How many trucks does Cole own? 4, plus the 2 side-by-sides and the sled trailer. Where does he keep his fuel? Big tank behind the shop. Why, no reason, Ethan said. There was a reason. Ethan Walker had spent 9 years of his life learning to hear a plan inside a sentence, and we're going to make the mountain do. It was not a threat. It was an alibi being built out loud in front of witnesses 3 weeks in advance. Kyle, sir, 2 things. Ethan opened the gate, which he had not done, and which the kid noticed. First, do not quit. Do not tell him you're sorry. Do not say one word to anybody about driving up here. Kyle blinked. You want me to keep working for him? I want you to keep breathing normal, Ethan said. You go back down there and you be exactly as dumb as he thinks you are. That's the only thing keeping your brothers well, and I'd guess your teeth. Okay. Kyle swallowed. I'll say, what twist? And then second thing, write it down. Write what down? Everything. Ethan pointed at the kid's truck. Buy a spiral notebook at the gas station. $2. Every night before you sleep, you write the date and the time and what he said and who was standing there. You don't show anybody. You don't tell anybody. You keep it under the seat of that truck and not in your house. Why not in my house? Because your house can burn down, Ethan said, and your truck can be driven away. Kyle Merrick looked at him for a long moment, and something in the kid's face changed the way a face changes when a person realizes for the first time that the world is a real place with real rules. Yes, sir, he said. He got in the Ranger and drove off, and Ethan Walker went back up to the cabin and sat down and wrote in his own notebook, Saturday, 10:15 a.m., Kyle Merrick of voluntary contact at gate admits delivering poison at direction of Cole Harrison. States Harrison provided the meat. States Harrison threatened Merrick's brother's employment. States Harrison told group, we are going to make the mountain do it. And underneath that, he wrote a second line, and it took him longer. Possible leak inside sheriff's office, Deputy Prine. He looked at that for a while. Then he went out to the shed, moved 4 boxes, and pulled a heavy green footlocker out from under a tarp where it had sat since the day he moved in. He did not open it. He carried it into the cabin, set it at the foot of his bed, and put a folded blanket on top of it, and it stayed there like that for 11 days. The first camera went missing on Monday. Not the camera on the gate, not the one at the cabin, the one in the north drainage 400 yards inside the property in a spot so unremarkable that Ethan had chosen it precisely because no reasonable person would look there. Somebody had looked there. The mount was still screwed to the tree. The camera was gone and the screws had been backed out with a driver not pried, which meant whoever took it had time and knew he had time. Ethan stood under that tree for 11 minutes without moving. Then he walked a slow spiral out from it, 300 yards in every direction, and on the fourth loop he found the boot print in the creek mud, and he crouched over it and looked at it for a long time. It was a size 12 Danner with a worn outside edge on the right heel. Rick Dunn walked on the outside of his right foot. Ethan had watched him do it at the cut fence and had filed it the way he filed everything without deciding to. Except Rick Dunn had no way to know that camera was there. Only 3 people had ever seen the camera map. Ethan, his lawyer in Missoula, and Sheriff Daniel Brooks, who had taken a copy in a manila folder 11 days ago and said, "I want a stack on my desk so tall a judge can't pretend not to see it." Ethan drove to the ridge and called Brooks and told him about the camera and did not tell him about the boot print. "I'll come look," Brooks said. "There's nothing to look at." "Ethan, I'll email you the coordinates and a photo." There was a pause on the line, and in that pause, Ethan heard a man understand something and decide not to be insulted by it. "All right," Brooks said quietly. "Send it to my personal email, not the office." "Sheriff, I've got 4 deputies," Brooks said, "and I've had a bad feeling about the mail for about 2 years, and I could never get past a feeling. So you send it to my personal, and you keep doing what you're doing, and you and me are going to have a longer conversation than either of us wants to have, but not on this phone." He hung up. Ethan stood on the ridge with the wind coming up out of the drainage and thought, so it is not one man. It never is. 3 days later, at 9:40 in the evening, they came for the cabin. He heard the trucks from a mile out, and he had time, which is the single most important thing anybody can have. He put Ruby in the root cellar under the kitchen with a blanket and a bowl of water, and he told her to stay, and she looked at him and lay down without a sound, and he shut the hatch. Then he sat in his own kitchen with the lights on and his hands flat on the table and waited. They came into the yard fast, 2 trucks, headlights washing the walls, doors, boots, 4 voices, maybe 5. Somebody hit the side of the cabin with something hard and the whole wall rang. "Walker!" That was Rick Dunn. "Walker, come out here!" Ethan did not move. Glass came in, the kitchen window on the north side, then the one over the sink, and the sound of it was enormous in that small room. Something heavy went through the second one and slid across the counter and landed on the floor, and it was a fence post. "You hear me, come out and talk like a man." They kept on for 6 minutes. They put out the porch light. They tore down the rain gutter. Somebody was working on the truck with a bat. And Ethan Walker sat in his kitchen with broken glass on the floor and his hands flat on the table. And he did not move, and he did not speak. And inside his chest, a very old machine was turning over and telling him exactly where each voice was standing and how many steps it would take. And he sat on it the way a man sits on a spooked horse. He counted instead. There were 5, 2 by the truck, 2 on the north wall, 1 walking, and the one walking had a heavier tread and did not shout, and that was Cole Harrison. And Cole Harris was doing a slow circle of the cabin looking in the windows. At the 4th window, he stopped. He looked in, and Ethan looked back, and the 2 men held each other's eyes through the broken glass for maybe 5 seconds. Cole smiled. "Hey there, Ethan," he said, conversational, like a man greeting a neighbor at a mailbox. Ethan said nothing. "You just gonna sit there? Nothing. That's what I figured." Cole leaned an elbow on the sill on the broken glass carefully and looked around the kitchen with real curiosity. "Nice place. Small. You got no pictures on the wall. You know that? Not one picture. Man lives somewhere 4 months and don't hang a picture that tells me something about him." Ethan looked at him. "It tells me he don't think he's staying," Cole said. Behind him, somebody put a rock through the last window, and Cole did not even turn around. "Rick," he called. "That's enough, boys. That's enough now." And then back through the window, mild as milk, they're spirited. "You put poison in my yard," Ethan said. It was the first thing he had said, and Cole's eyebrows went up a 1/4 inch pleased, like a man who has finally gotten a fish to move on a line. "Now that's a hell of an accusation. You handed a 23-year-old kid a Ziploc bag." Did I? You told him it wouldn't kill her. Cole tilted his head. Well, he said, did it? And there it was, and Ethan felt it go through him like a wire, and his hands came up off that table an inch and stopped. Cole watched them stop. He watched them stop, and he saw exactly what it had cost, and his face changed, and for the first time all night, there was something in it that was not amusement. Huh, Cole Harrison said softly. Get off my property. You know what I thought when you first showed up? Cole did not move. I thought city man, retired, buy him out or wait him out, either one. And then you didn't take 15 and you didn't take 25, and I thought, all right, he's stubborn. Stubborn breaks. He shook his head slowly. But I've been at this a long time, and I've broken a lot of stubborn men. And I want to tell you something honest, Ethan. You're not stubborn. Ethan said nothing. You're waiting, Cole said. I've seen a man wait before. My daddy waited. He waited 2 years on a fella that shorted him on a hay contract, and then one night he just went and did it. Cole leaned in closer. So what I want to know is what are you waiting for? A judge, Ethan said. Cole laughed out loud. A judge. He straightened up off the sill. Son, I have had dinner at that judge's house. That's good, Ethan said. Say it again, louder. Cole stopped. His eyes moved. Left then up, then along the eave of the cabin, and Ethan watched him do it, and watched him find nothing because there was nothing to find on the eave. It was in the birdhouse. 12 feet away on a post painted white filthy, hanging crooked, exactly the kind of ugly homemade thing a man ignores completely. You're bluffing, Cole said. I might be. You've got no camera out here. Rick pulled him. And that was the second thing Ethan Walker got that night handed to him, free in Cole Harrison's own voice in the middle of a felony. Rick pulled one, Ethan said. There's 14. The silence that came after that lasted about 2 seconds, and it changed the temperature of the entire yard. Cole, Rick Dunn's voice from somewhere near the trucks, and it had gone thin. Cole, let's go. Shut up. Cole, if there's cameras, I said shut up. But the boots were already moving toward the trucks, all of them. And Cole Harrison stood in the middle of his own men leaving, and Ethan Walker watched the exact moment a king counted his kingdom and came up short. Cole put his face back in the window. You think paper's gonna save you, he said. And the mildness was gone, and what was underneath it was so much worse. You think a piece of paper is a wall. I've been in this country since I was born, and I'm gonna tell you what this country does to men like you. It doesn't beat you, it just goes on longer than you do. That's fine. You'll be alone up here in January. I know. Nobody's coming. I know that too. Cole stared at him. What in the hell happened to you, he said, that you're not scared? Ethan looked at him through the broken window, and for a moment he thought about answering honestly and did not. Get off my property, Mr. Harrison. They left at 9:58. Ethan sat where he was for 11 more minutes. Then he got up, opened the root cellar, and a dog came out of it and pressed against his legs so hard she nearly knocked him over. And Ethan Walker sat down on the kitchen floor in the broken glass with his arms around her and stayed there a while. He called it in at 10:30 from the Ridge. He did not call the office. He called Daniel Brooks at home. Brooks arrived at 12:40 in the morning in a flannel shirt, driving his own pickup alone, and walked around that cabin with a flashlight for 20 minutes without saying a word. And when he came back, he stood in the yard and looked at the ground. Every window, he said, every window on 2 sides. Truck. Windshield hood, both mirrors. Brooks nodded slowly. He's never done a whole house before, he said mostly to himself. He's done a barn. He's done vehicles. He's never stood in a man's yard and taken a whole house apart. He's angry. He's angry, Brooks agreed. Why, Ethan looked at him. Because I didn't come out. Brooks lifted his head. Say that again. He came here for one thing, Sheriff. He came here for me to open that door. He wants me swinging in a yard with 5 witnesses, and it ends up self-defense. And I'm the crazy veteran who lost it, and he owns this mountain by Christmas. Ethan's voice never rose. He broke every window I've got, and I sat at that table and did nothing. And the reason he's angry is that he spent 6 minutes and $1,100 of my glass, and he did not get the one thing he came for. Daniel Brooks stood in that dark yard and looked at Ethan Walker for a long moment. How many people, he said, could have sat in that kitchen? Not many. No, Brooks said, not many. He rubbed his face with both hands. All right, Now I'm going to tell you the thing I said we'd have to talk about. The leak. The leak. Brooks put his hands on his hips. Roy Prine's been with me 9 years. His wife's sister is married to Cole's brother-in-law. I've known that the whole time, and it never mattered because there was nothing to leak. Now there's something to leak, and Kyle Merrick got a phone call 20 minutes after I left his mama's kitchen. Ethan did not ask how the sheriff knew about that. So here's how it's going to be, Brooks said. From here on, nothing you send me goes to the office, nothing. You call my cell or you drive to my house. If I call you from the office phone, I am lying to you on purpose and you play along. Understood. Second thing, the county attorney called me Tuesday. Brooks's mouth went flat. Unprompted, asked me how the situation on the Kessler place was developing. That's the word he used, developing. In 9 years, that man has never once called me to ask how anything was developing. They're getting ahead of it. They're building a file on you, Brooks said. Not on him, on you. Isolated, armed, combat background, fixation on trespassers, documenting neighbors obsessively. He let that sit. You see it. Ethan saw it. They're building the man who snaps, he said. They're building the man who snapped. Brooks agreed, so that when something happens up here and Ethan, something is going to happen up here, there's already a story on the shelf and all anybody's got to do is take it down. Ethan looked out at his ruined windows. Then I'd better not snap. You'd better do better than that. Brooks stepped closer. You'd better be so boring that a jury falls asleep. You fix that glass tomorrow and you photograph every piece. You don't buy one more gun. You don't put up one more sign that could read as a threat. If a Harrison truck comes up that road, you get in your house and you call me and you do not walk out to meet it. And Ethan, sir, you do not go up that mountain after anybody, ever, for any reason. Brooks's eyes were hard. Because the second a man like you leaves the yard, every advantage you've got flips over. Ethan Walker did not answer that, and Daniel Brooks noticed that he did not, and neither man said anything about it. The sheriff left at 2 in the morning. Ethan swept glass until 4. At 4:15, he sat down on the edge of his bed and looked at the blanket folded on top of the green footlocker. He took the blanket off. He sat there another 11 minutes. Then he opened it. The smell came up first, which he had not braced for, canvas and gun oil and dust and something else underneath, a specific chemical smell from a specific place, and it took 18 years off him in about a second and a half. On top was a folded shirt he had never been able to throw away. Under the shirt was a flat wooden case, and inside the case was a trident. Gold the eagle and the anchor and the pistol and the trident, and Ethan Walker had not looked at it since the day he had been handed a folded flag in Virginia and had gone home and put it in a box. Under that were maps, 4 of them laminated, marked in grease pencil, in a handwriting he recognized as his own but did not feel like his own. Places he was not allowed to name and had not named, not once, not to a therapist, not to a woman he had almost married in 2011. And under the maps was the photograph. 2 men on the tailgate of a truck at Little Creek. One of them was 40 and looked 30. The other one was 29 and was laughing with his mouth full and had 401 days to live. Ethan Walker held that photograph in a cabin with no windows in it at 4:30 in the morning, and Ruby came and put her head on his knee, and he said out loud, I told him I was going to go somewhere, nothing happens. The dog looked up at him. He said, that sounds boring as hell. Ethan set the photograph on the bed. Then he took out the last thing in the box, which was not a weapon and was not a medal. It was a spiral-bound field manual, water stained with 300 pages of terrain, weather movement, survival, and hypothermia progression, and on the inside cover, in his own handwriting, were 4 words he had written when he was 31 years old and had believed them completely. The ground is neutral. He read that line 6 or 7 times. Then he closed the manual, and he did not put it back in the box. He set it on the table by the window, and he closed the footlocker, and he did not put the blanket back on top of it. The next 11 days were quiet, and the quiet was worse. No trucks, no shots, nothing on the cameras but elk and 1 very fat black bear. Ethan reglazed 9 windows, rebuilt his gate with steel pipe set in concrete, and drove to Missoula and sat with his lawyer, a woman named Priya Ramaman, who was 44 and had the deadest, calmest eyes he had ever seen on a civilian. She went through the file for 2 hours. This is the best documented harassment case I have ever been handed, she said. By a distance, it's not close. That's good. It's very good, and it's going to lose. Ethan set his coffee down. Explain that. Venue. She spread her hands. Every piece of this has to be charged in that county by that county attorney in front of that judge with a jury drawn from a town where 110 people have some part of their income coming through Harrison Outfitters. I can file civil. I will file civil. And the second I do, his lawyer files 11 motions, and this thing takes 3 years and costs you $200,000 you don't have. So what do I do? You keep documenting because someday it may go federal, or it may go to Fish and Wildlife, and they don't care who ate dinner at whose house. Priya leaned forward. And you understand that between now and then, you are a man with a very good file and no protection at all. Those are two different things, and people confuse them constantly. I don't confuse them. No, she said, studying him. I don't think you do. She hesitated, which he had not seen her do. Mr. Walker, can I ask you something off the record? Go ahead. Are you all right up there? Ethan thought about it honestly. No, ma'am, he said, but I'm not going to do anything about it. That's a strange answer. It's the only true one I've got. He drove home 4 hours in the dark. And at 11:20 that night, sitting in his truck at his own new steel gate, with the headlights on it, he found the second thing that changed at everything. There was a game trail camera bolted to the pine across the county road. Not his. Pointed at his gate. He sat in the truck with the engine running and looked at it for a long time. Then he got out, walked over and read the little sticker on the bottom of the housing, and it said Harrison Outfitters, property with a phone number. Cole Harrison was watching his gate, which meant Cole Harrison knew when he left and when he came back, which meant every one of those 11 quiet days had not been quiet at all. It had been a man learning a schedule. Ethan did not take the camera down. He stood there in the road at 11:30 at night in the beam of his own headlights, and he understood with total clarity that whatever came next had already been decided by somebody else, and that his only real choice was what kind of man would be standing there when it arrived. He walked back to the truck. Then he stopped, turned around and walked back to the camera, and he leaned down close to the lens so his face filled it completely. I know it's there, he said, and I'm not taking it down because I've got nothing to hide, and you're going to have a hard time explaining to a judge why you did. Then he drove up to his cabin. The call came 4 days later at 6 in the morning. Kyle Merrick whispering from a gas station 40 miles away. Mr. Walker. Kyle, I got the notebook. The kid was breathing hard. I got 60 pages. I did what you said every night. Good. He's doing it Thursday. Ethan set his coffee down. Doing what? I don't know exactly. Kyle's voice was shaking so badly it was hard to follow. There's a client group in from Houston. 6 guys, big money. He told them 100% success or full refund, and he's already spent it. And he's been up on the maps all week with Rick and Boone and Taylor, and they've been talking about the north drainage and the bench above it, and Cole keeps saying this is the last time we do it once we do it right. That's just a hunt, Kyle. No, sir. The kid swallowed audibly. Because they're not taking clients. Ethan went very still. Say that again. The Houston boys got put in a lodge in Ennis for 3 days, all expenses. Cole told them the weather's wrong. Kyle's voice dropped even lower. It's just the 5 of them going up. Cole, Rick, Boone, Tyler, and Dale. 5 guys, no clients, no rifles booked out, and they loaded 2 cans of and a chainsaw and a spool of that steel cable, and Rick took the plates off the gray truck. Ethan closed his eyes. When? Thursday, before light. Cole said they'd be off the mountain before anybody knew they were on it. Kyle's breath hitched. Mr. Walker, he said one more thing, and it's the reason I'm calling you from a gas station instead of my house. Go ahead. He said when it's done, that man's gonna have burned his own place down and walked off into the timber, and won't nobody in this county be a bit surprised. Ethan Walker stood in his kitchen with the phone against his ear, and the sun not up yet, and every window in the room reglazed by his own hands. Kyle, he said, listen to me very carefully. Yes, sir. You are going to drive to Sheriff Brooks's house, not the office. His house on 2nd and Custer, the gray one with the boat. You are going to knock on his door, and you are going to give him that notebook, and you are going to say every word you just said to me. He'll know it was me. He'll know it was you, Ethan said. And that's the price, son. There's no version of this where you get out clean. There was a long silence on the line. Okay, Keel Merrick said. Oh, okay, I'll go. Kyle, sir, thank you. The kid made a sound that was not quite a laugh. I killed your dog, he said. You didn't. Close enough. Kyle, Ethan gripped the phone. Go now. He hung up. And Ethan Walker stood in that kitchen for exactly as long as it took the coffee to go cold, and then he did 4 things in order. He called Daniel Brooks's cell and left a message because it went to voicemail, and it went to voicemail because at that hour, Daniel Brooks was 70 miles away at a fatal rollover on the highway with 3 deputies and every unit the county had. He drove to the ridge and emailed Priya Raman a file titled Thursday with everything in it. He walked down to the shed and got a roll of orange survey tape, and he spent 4 hours doing something that would look insane to anyone watching, which was walking the north drainage and the bench above it and tying bright orange ribbon on every dead standing snag, every undercut bank, every place where the shale went loose over a 40-foot drop, and photographing each one with the date on his phone, marking hazards, in writing, in advance. And then he came back to the cabin at 2 in the afternoon, and he sat down on the edge of his bed, and he opened the green footlocker one more time, and he took out the field manual he had already taken out, and under where it had been there was a small, flat tin he had forgotten was in there. He opened it. Inside were 9 feet of paracord, a signal mirror, a striker, and a folded square of mylar the size of a deck of cards. Ethan Walker looked at those 4 items for a long moment. He was not thinking about hurting anybody. He wanted that on the record in his own head plainly because he knew that someday somebody was going to ask him, and he wanted the answer to be true. He was thinking about Thursday morning and 5 men with 2 cans of gasoline and no license plates coming up a mountain in the dark to burn a cabin with a man and a dog inside it. And he was thinking about the 4 words he had written when he was 31. The ground is neutral. He put the tin in his coat pocket. Then he went out to the porch and sat down on the step with his hand on Ruby's back and looked out at 700 acres of timber and cliff and drainage going gold in the afternoon light. And he said very quietly, "It's not, though." The dog leaned into him. "It's never neutral," Ethan Walker said. "It belongs to whoever knows it." And Thursday was 36 hours away. Kyle Merrick sat on Sheriff Daniel Brooks's front porch from 6:40 in the evening until 1 in the morning, holding a $2 spiral notebook against his chest, like a man holding a wound closed. Brooks's wife came out twice. The first time she offered him coffee, and he said, "No thank you, ma'am." The second time she brought it anyway and set it beside him on the step and said, "He's at a rollover out past the county line. 3 dead. He'll be late." "I'll wait." "You'll freeze." "I'll wait, ma'am." She looked at him a while at the shaking hands and the notebook, and the truck parked crooked in the street with the door still hanging open, and she went back inside and came out with a blanket and dropped it on his shoulders without a word. Daniel Brooks got home at 1 in the morning, smelling like diesel and blood, and found a 23-year-old on his porch under his wife's quilt. "Kyle?" "Sheriff." "You been here how long?" "Since about 6. Brooks stood in his own yard, 61 years old, having spent 7 hours cutting 3 people out of a truck, and he looked at that kid, and something in him went very tired and very awake at the same time. "Give it here," he said. He read it standing up in the porch light. He read for 11 minutes without saying anything, turning pages, and Kyle Merrick watched his face and could not read one single thing on it. Then Brooks closed the notebook and said, "Who else has seen this?" "Nobody." "You tell your mother." "No, sir." "Your brother?" "No, sir." "Good." Brooks tapped the cover against his palm. "Kyle, I want you to understand what you just did. You put your own name on a felony in your own handwriting, 60 pages of it. You just handed me the rope for your own neck." Kyle's chin came up. "I know it." "Do you?" "I've been knowing it since Sunday." Brooks looked at him for a long moment. "All right," he said quietly. "Then I'm going to do you the courtesy of being straight with you. This is a boy's account of what grown men said in a shop. It's hearsay from a kid with a motive and a criminal exposure. I cannot walk into a judge's house at 1 in the morning and get a warrant off it. Not this judge." Kyle's face fell so fast it was almost audible. "Then it's for nothing." "It is not for nothing." Brooks put the notebook inside his coat. "It just don't stop Thursday. That's the part I need you to hear. It don't stop Thursday, son." "Then what does—" Daniel Brooks did not answer because There was no answer, and he was not a man who made things up to comfort people. At 1:35 in the morning, he called Ethan Walker's cell, and it rang 7 times and went to nothing because Ethan Walker was on the ridge, and the ridge only worked at certain hours, and this was not one of them. At 1:40, he called dispatch to log a request for extra patrol on the Kessler Road, and the voice that answered was Roy Prines because Roy Prine had traded onto nights 3 weeks ago, and Brooks heard that voice and said, "Never mind, Roy, wrong line." He hung up and sat in his truck in his own driveway. "Son of a bitch," he said. Ethan Walker got the message at 4 minutes past 4 in the morning, standing on the ridge because he had not slept and had walked up there at 3:30 to check the weather. The weather was the thing he had been watching for 2 days. A cold front out of Alberta forecast Thursday evening. Snow above 6,000 feet, temperature dropping 30 degrees in 9 hours, wind out of the northwest at 35. At 3:52 that morning, he refreshed the page and the front had moved. It was not coming Thursday evening. It was coming Thursday morning, and it had grown, and the little map showed a hard blue line laid across his mountain like a hand pressed flat. Ethan stood there and read it 3 times. "That's not good," he said. He played Brooks's voicemail then, and it was 14 seconds long, and it said, "It's Dan. Kid came to my house. I got the notebook. I can't get paper on it tonight. I'll be up there at first light with whatever I can put together. Ethan, do not be in that cabin." Ethan lowered the phone. He had already decided that at 9 o'clock the night before. Ruby had gone down the mountain at 8 in Walt Jennings's truck because Walt Jennings had driven up unannounced with a case of beer he did not drink and said, "I hear things in that store, son. I hear a lot of things I don't repeat. Tonight I'm repeating one. Give me the dog." "Walt, give me the damn dog, Ethan." And Ethan Walker had knelt down in his own yard and put his hands on either side of that dog's face and said, "Go with Walt, go on now." And the dog had not wanted to go and had gone anyway, and Walt had driven off with her looking back through the rear window, and that was at 8:14 on Wednesday night. So the cabin was empty. The cabin had been empty since 8:14. At 4:12 in the morning, headlights came up the county road. Ethan saw them from the ridge 400 feet above and half a mile back, and he counted them out loud. 1, 2. 2 trucks. They stopped at the gate, the steel gate he had set in concrete with his own hands, and he watched the little bloom of a cutting torch go up in the dark like a struck match and burn for 4 minutes and go out. "Okay," he said. He raised his phone and started recording. His hands were completely steady, which he noticed and which he did not like because he knew what it meant. It meant something in him had already gone somewhere else and was doing arithmetic. At 4:21, the trucks came through the gate and up the 2-track to the cabin. Doors, 5 men. He counted them by the way they moved in the headlights, and he could name every one of them by their walk from half a mile out. And if you had asked him how, he could not have told you. He heard Rick Dunn shout, "He ain't in here, truck's gone." And then Cole Harrison's voice carrying up the drainage the way voices do at 4 in the morning in cold air. Then he's walking, do it anyway. Ethan Walker stood on that ridge with his phone up and watched 5 men carry 2 gas cans into his home. He did not move. He had thought about this moment for 36 hours and had built the whole thing around one idea, which was that the only thing he could not afford to lose was the truth of it, and the truth of it required that he not be there. Still, at 4:26, the first window went orange. At 4:27, the roof took it. And Ethan Walker made a sound on that ridge that he did not know he was making low from somewhere under his ribs, and his free hand went to the front of his own coat and gripped it. Everything he owned was in that house, not the money. He did not care about the money. The photograph was in that house. 2 men on a tailgate at Little Creek, and one of them laughing with his mouth full, and there was 1 copy in the world, and it was in a green footlocker 11 feet from the front door. The trident was in that house. Marcus Bell's name written on the back of a photograph in a dead man's own handwriting was in that house. "No," Ethan said. His legs actually moved. 2 steps downhill before he stopped them. He stood there breathing hard 45 miles from anybody watching $400,000 in 18 years and 1 dead friend go up into the dark, and he made himself say it out loud because out loud was the only thing that had ever worked. You go down there, you're a body in a burned house, and he's a man who found it that way. At 4:31, the roof came in. At 4:33, Ethan Walker called 911. The phone rang twice. County Dispatch. It was Roy Prine. Ethan closed his eyes. This is Ethan Walker on the old Kessler place. My residence is on fire. There are 5 individuals on my property who said it. Their vehicles are at my cabin. I am recording video from a distance and I have called Sheriff Brooks directly. There was a pause on the line that was 1 full second too long. Say again, sir. You said fire. You heard me, Roy. Another pause. Sir, are you injured? I said I'm recording video, Ethan said. I want that in the log. I want the time in the log. 4:33 a.m. Thursday, 5 individuals, 2 vehicles, 1 gray plates removed. Sir, I'm going to need you to stay calm and stay on the line. I'm not staying on the line. Mr. Walker. Roy, Ethan's voice went so quiet it barely carried to his own ears. When they ask you later how long it took you to roll a unit, I want you to remember that I said the time out loud. He hung up. Then he called Daniel Brooks's cell, and it went to voicemail again, and he left 22 seconds of the flattest, cleanest report of his life, and he hung up and put the phone in his chest pocket. And then the second thing happened, and it was the thing that changed everything, and Ethan Walker had not planned for it and could not have planned for it. At 4:41, Cole Harrison started looking for him. He heard it start, voices spreading out, flashlights breaking apart from the fire and moving up the 2-track, then off it into the timber. Somebody shouting, check the shed, check the shed. Somebody else farther off. He's on foot, he can't be far. They were not leaving. Ethan had assumed they would burn it and go. 20 minutes in and out off the mountain before light, exactly like Kyle had said. That was the plan Cole Harrison had described in his own shop. But Cole Harrison had come up that mountain believing there would be a man in that cabin, and there was not, and the whole story he had built for himself needed a body in the timber. And now that body was somewhere out there awake and with a phone. Ethan understood in about 2 seconds what that meant. It meant Cole could not go home. It meant the only version of Thursday that Cole Harrison could survive was one where he found Ethan Walker first. Oh hell, Ethan said. At 4:53, the flashlights turned north. North was the drainage. North was 400 feet of shale over an undercut creek and 11 standing dead snags and a bench that dropped off into country where the last person to walk it had probably been dead 60 years, and Ethan Walker had tied orange survey ribbon on every hazard in it 36 hours ago with a timestamp on every photograph. And the front was coming in at 9. He looked at the sky and he could already feel it in his face to change the wind swinging around. Then Ethan Walker did the single most important thing he did that entire year, and he did it knowing exactly what it cost him. He cupped his hands and he yelled, Harrison! The flashlights stopped. Every one of them. Harrison, this is Walker. Go back to your trucks. Silence down there. Then a voice thin with distance, Rick Dunn. He's up on the ridge. There's weather coming in at 9. It's not the one on the forecast. It moved. He drew a breath and put everything he had into it. 30-degree drop and snow. You are not dressed for it. Go back to your trucks and drive out. Cole, that was somebody younger. Boone, maybe. Cole, he's calling it in. And then Cole Harrison's voice came up out of the dark, and it was not thin, and it was not scared, and it was the worst thing Ethan heard all night. He's lying. It's on the National Weather Service, Ethan shouted. Pull it up on your phone. It takes 10 seconds. Ain't no signal up here. That's right, Ethan yelled. There isn't. Think about what that means. There was a pause of maybe 4 seconds. And then a rifle went off. Ethan was on the ground before he registered deciding to be. Flat behind a rock shelf with his cheek in frozen grass and his heart going like a bird in a box. A second shot. A third. They were not aimed. He knew that instantly from the sound and from the fact that he was alive. 300 yards uphill at a voice in the dark from a man who could not see a thing. But they had been fired, and Ethan Walker lay there on his stomach with his phone still recording in his chest pocket and thought with a clarity that felt also almost like grief. You just ended your own life, Cole. You just did it yourself, and you don't even know it yet. Because a man can talk his way out of a fire. A man cannot talk his way out of 3 rounds fired at a citizen at 4:55 in the morning, recorded on that citizen's own, deeded land with a county dispatch log stamped 22 minutes earlier. Down below, somebody screamed, Cole, what the hell? Shut up. You fired. You actually fired. I said shut up. And then Ethan heard faintly, absolutely distinctly, the sound of a man being shoved into a truck fender and the sound of Rick Dunn saying, "We are done. Cole, we are done. We gotta go. We gotta go right now." He's got video. So what? So we find him, Cole Harrison said, and there ain't no video. Ethan Walker heard that sentence from 300 yards away and understood that there were now 5 men on his mountain and that at least 3 of them were terrified of the 4th. He got up into a crouch. He did not run. He moved north and east along the ridge, unhurried on ground. He had walked 140 times and he did the only 3 things he had left to do, which were to stay alive. Keep recording and get to a place where a phone worked. That took him 2 hours. At 6:50 in the morning, the wind swung hard out of the northwest, and it came so fast that Ethan felt the temperature drop on the back of his neck like a hand. It was 12 degrees colder in 9 minutes. At 7:10, it started to snow. By 7:40, he could not see the far side of the drainage, and the thing that had been a dark mountain with 5 flashlights on it was now a white nothing with a wind in it that took the sound out of the world. Ethan Walker got to Walt Jennings's back fence line at 8:15 with ice in his beard. Walt met him at the door with a shotgun in one hand and a coffee pot in the other, which was the most Montana thing Ethan had ever seen, and Ruby came off the couch so hard she skidded into the wall. "You're burnt," Walt said. "It's soot. Your place gone." Walt closed his eyes for a second. "Get in here." "Phone. Get in here first." Daniel Brooks answered on the second ring at 8:19. Ethan gave it to him in 90 seconds. Times names, the gate torch, the gas cans, the 3 rounds, the direction they went, the fact that Cole Harrison had said we find him, and there ain't no video. Brooks was silent for a beat when he finished. "You're at Walt's?" "Yes." "You stay at Walt's." "Sheriff, there's 5 men in the north drainage and it's snowing." "Ethan." "They went in with camo jackets and no packs, no shelter. Rick Dunn's got a bad hip, and Boone Reyes is 19 years old, and Tyler Voss weighs 150 pounds soaking wet." Ethan's voice did not rise, but something got into it. "The high today is now 19 and the wind is 30. Sheriff, they have got about 11 hours. "I know." "Then get people up there." "Ethan, listen to me." Brooks's voice was strange. "I've got a problem." "What problem?" "Roy Prine logged your call at 5:26. Ethan went completely still in Walt Jennings's kitchen. "I called at 4:33. "I know you did," Brooks said, "because you said the time out loud on a recorded line and he still wrote 5:26, and Ethan, that son of a bitch, just handed me the first honest piece of evidence I've had in 6 years. I put him on administrative leave at 7 this morning, and I took his phone." Ethan sat down slowly on a kitchen chair. "He called Cole," he said. "He called somebody at 4:35, Brooks said. 2 minutes after you hung up, 90-second call, and now I got a man on a mountain in a blizzard who knew at 4:35 that the sheriff was coming at first light." Walt Jennings set a cup of coffee down in front of Ethan and did not say a word. "What do you need from me?" Ethan said. "I need you to sit in that house." "Sheriff, I need you to sit in that house," Brooks repeated. "Because at some point today, the county attorney is going to be told that a former special operations sniper had 5 men who tried to kill him wandering around his private mountain in a storm. And if you are anywhere near that mountain when they find them, I cannot help you. I cannot. Do you understand me?" Ethan looked at the window, which had gone white. "How many people can you get?" "Search and Rescue's got 11 volunteers and 2 of them are 70. Fish and Wildlife's got Warden Island, and he's the best man in this county, and he's 1 man. State's got a helicopter that cannot fly in this." "So 11 volunteers and a warden." "Yeah." "For 700 acres of cliff country in a whiteout." "Yeah," Daniel Brooks said. "That's what I've got." There was a silence on that line that lasted maybe 6 seconds, and both men knew what was in it. "Ethan," Brooks said, "don't. You need somebody who knows that ground." "Ethan, there is nobody alive who knows that ground but me and the 5 men on it. You go up there and every prosecutor in this state gets to stand in front of a jury and say the defendant inserted himself into the search." Brooks said. "You understand that's the sentence. That's the exact sentence they'll use." Ethan Walker looked down at his own hands, which were shaking now that they were warm. "Sheriff," he said, "I'm going to ask you one question and then I'll do whatever you say." "Ask it." If a 19-year-old kid dies out there tonight because the one man who could have found him sat in a kitchen protecting himself, what exactly did I buy that mountain for? Daniel Brooks did not answer for a long time. Nyland's staging at the county road turnout at 10, he finally said. You'll go with him, and you will not go anywhere without him, and he will document every step you take. And Ethan, you will not touch anything, and you will not lead. He leads. You advise. Understood. And if this goes bad, it's on me, Ethan said. Not you. Put that in writing right now in the log at 8:31 a.m. Say I insisted. Damn right I will, Brooks said and hung up. Warden Nyland was 61 years old, built like a fence post, and had been a game warden for 33 years. And the first thing he said when Ethan Walker got out of the truck at the turnout at 9:50 was, I want to be real clear that I don't like this. Neither do I. Brooks says you know that drainage. I've walked every foot of it. Nyland looked at him. Why? Because I own it, Ethan said. And because I've spent my whole life not being able to sleep unless I know where the ground goes. Nyland chewed on that. All right, he said. Ground rules. I got a body camera, and it's on, and it stays on. You walk on my left, you touch nothing. And if I say we turn around, and you don't argue with me about it, because I've pulled 41 people off this mountain range, and 11 of them were dead, and I've never once been wrong about turning around. Yes, sir. Good. Nyland shouldered his pack. Now tell me what I'm walking into. Ethan told him. 5 men, direction of travel at 4:53. No packs, no shelter, cotton under camo. 1,200 feet of elevation gain if they kept going. The bench, the shale, the undercut, the dead snags. Nyland's eyebrows went up at that last part. You marked hazards. 2 days ago. Why 2 days ago? Ethan hesitated for exactly 1 beat. Because I knew somebody was coming, he said, and I did not want anybody to die on my land. Warden Nyland stood in the snow and looked at him for a long moment. You know how that's going to sound, he said. I know exactly how it's going to sound. You marked the dangerous ground the same week 5 men walked into it. I photographed every ribbon with a date stamp, and I emailed it to a lawyer in Missoula on Tuesday morning, Ethan said. So it's either the most incriminating thing I've ever done, or the only reason anybody's alive tonight, and I made my peace with which one at about 2 o'clock Tuesday afternoon. Nyland turned and started walking. Left side, he said. Keep up. They found the first truck at 10:40. It was the gray one, the one with no plates, and it was nose down in the creek at the second crossing with the windshield starred and the driver's door hanging open. And Warden Nyland walked around it twice with his camera and said, somebody drove this in a hurry and in the dark. That's a 9-inch drop and with a rock lip, Ethan said. You have to know it's there. Anybody hurt? There's blood on the wheel. There was. Not much. Enough. And behind the gray truck jammed sideways on a 2-track, 11 feet wide, with timber on both sides was the second truck, which had come down after it and could not get around it and could not back up the switchback in the dark. Nyland stood there a long moment. They stranded themselves, he said. Yes, sir. You didn't touch either one of these. I have not been within a half mile of these vehicles until this minute. That's what your GPS is going to say. That's what my phone, my lawyer, and the Ridge Cell Tower are going to say. Nyland grunted, which from him was a substantial statement. They found the first man at 12:19. He was sitting against a dead spruce 400 yards above the trucks, and he was awake, and he was so cold he could not close his hands. It was Boone Reyes, 19 years old, and when he saw them coming through the snow, he started crying before he could get a word out. Hey, Nyland said, going down on one knee. Hey now, Boone, look at me. What's your name? Baboon. Where you hurt? I ain't hurt. I'm just cold. I'm so cold, mister, I can't feel my legs. I've been trying to walk down, and I can't find the road. I've been walking all morning. You found it 3 times, Ethan said quietly. You crossed it twice. Boone's head came up, and he saw who was standing there, and his whole face collapsed. Oh, God, he said. Oh, God, mister. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I didn't want to. I swear to God, I didn't want to. Don't talk, Ethan said. He said it was going to be a scare. He said we was just going to scare you. Boone, don't talk, not to me. Ethan crouched down. Anything you want to say, you say it to the warden on his camera when you're warm. Not to me. Do you understand nothing you say to me helps you? Nyland was already stripping his own outer shell off. Get his boots off, he said. They spent 40 minutes on that kid. Dry socks, chemical warmers, the Mylar out of Ethan's coat pocket, the tin he had carried up there for himself. And Ethan Walker knelt in the snow and put a heat pack against the femoral artery of a boy who had helped burn his house down 8 hours earlier, and rubbed that boy's hands between his own to get the blood moving. At 1 o'clock, Boone said through chattering teeth, "Why are you doing this?" Ethan did not look up. "Because you're 19, he said. That ain't a reason. It's the only one I've got, and it's enough." At 1:15, Nyland got him on his feet, and at 1:20, before they started down, Ethan asked the only question he asked that day. "Boone, where are the other 4? The kid's face did something complicated. "We split up." "Why, because Cole took the sat phone." Ethan and Nyland looked at each other. "Say that again," Nyland said. "Cole had a sat phone in his coat the whole time." "The whole time." Boone's voice cracked. "Rick found out about 6 this morning when it started coming down, and he asked Cole to call out, and Cole said no. He said if we call out, we're all going to prison. He said we walk out on our own and we never say a word, and it's just 5 guys who got lost hunting." "Rick agreed to that." "Rick hit him," Boone said. "Rick hit him in the mouth and grabbed for the phone and Cole." The kid stopped. "Cole what?" Nyland said. "Cole put a rifle on him," Boone whispered. "On Rick. On his own guy. He said the next man who touches this phone is staying on this mountain." Ward Nealon stood up very slowly. "Where'd they go, son?" "Rick and Tyler went east. Down the big open one." "East and down the big open one," Ethan repeated, and his voice changed and Nyland heard it change. "What's east?" Nyland said. "East is the shale bench," Ethan said. "Over the undercut." "How bad?" "With 4 inches of new snow on it," Ethan said. "It's the worst ground on this mountain." "And Harrison?" Boone Reyes shook his head. "Cole went up," he said. "They got the kid to the road at 3:10. There was an ambulance, and there were 4 deputies, and there was Daniel Brooks standing in the snow with no hat on, and there were already 2 news vans from Bozeman. And there was Merle Dunphy, the county attorney in a wool coat that had never been outdoors before, standing next to a man in a suit that Ethan did not recognize. Ethan Walker climbed into Nyland's truck and shut the door and did not get out. He watched through the glass as Dunphy walked over to Brooks and started talking, and he watched Brooks listen for about 11 seconds and then say something short, and he watched Dunphy point at Nyland's truck. At 3:20, Brooks opened the passenger door. "Get out and stand where I can see you," he said. "You're going in Nyland's truck to my office, and you are going to sit in my personal office, and you are not going to say one word to anybody, and my wife is bringing you soup and Ethan." "Sir, Priya Raymond is already driving. She left Missoula at 11. "Who called her?" "I did," Brooks said, "at 8:32. Ethan looked at him. "That's the second nicest thing anybody's done for me in 4 years. What's the first? A man took my dog. They found Tyler Voss at 5:40 in the evening. Ethan Walker was not there, and that was the worst 3 hours of his life. He sat in a sheriff's office in a town of 1,100 people with a lawyer beside him, telling him to say nothing, listening to the radio through a wall, while 11 volunteers and 1 warden crossed a shale bench in the dark with headlamps, and he could not go, and he knew every foot of that ground, and he could not go. At 5:42, the radio said they had a live one. At 5:51, it said the live one was going into shock. At 6:04, it said the live one was asking for Walker. Priya Raman put her hand flat on the table. "No," she said. "Priya, absolutely not. You do not go into a room with a witness. Not tonight, not tomorrow, not ever without me and a court reporter." "He's dying." "He's not dying. They've got him and Ethan." She leaned forward. "Listen to what I am about to tell you, because it is the only thing that matters for the rest of your life. There are 5 men on that mountain. 2 are alive so far. If 2 or 3 of them die tonight, and I think they will, then tomorrow morning, the story is not arson. Tomorrow morning, the story is that 4 men died on a former sniper's private property, and the sniper had marked the hazards 2 days in advance." Ethan closed his eyes. "I know. They already have the tape," she said. "Dunphy has photographs of your orange ribbons. They came off a Harrison camera on the county road, and they were in his hand at 3 o'clock this afternoon." Ethan opened his eyes. "Cole's camera." Cole's camera on the pine across from your gate, Priya said, which you deliberately did not remove and which you leaned into and told on video that you had nothing to hide. She sat back, which is either the dumbest thing I have ever seen a client do or the single luckiest, and I have not decided. At 8:30 in the evening, Ward Nyland came into the sheriff's office with ice on his eyebrows and sat down across from Ethan Walker without taking his coat off. Voss is at the hospital in Bozeman, he said. He'll keep his fingers, maybe not 2 toes. Rick done? Aw, Nyland shook his head slowly. We found him at the bottom of the undercut, he said, about 70 feet down. He'd been there since sometime before noon. Ethan sat back in the chair. Was it the shale? It was the shale, Nyland said. There's a ribbon 11 feet from where he went over. Orange, still tied. He walked right past it in a whiteout and he never saw it. Nobody said anything for a while. Voss talked, Nyland said, in the sled on the way down, and I got all of it on camera, and Brooks has got it, and Dunphy has got it, and I want you to hear one part of it from me. Go ahead. He said, and I'm giving you his words, Walker yelled at us to go back. Twice. He told us about the weather before it come in. Cole said he was lying. Nyland's jaw moved. Then he said Rick wanted to walk down the road and give up, and Cole wouldn't let him. Ethan put his hand over his mouth. And then he said one more thing. Nyland went on, and I'm going to tell you this one careful. He said, tell Walker I'm sorry about the doing. Ethan Walker sat in that chair for 11 seconds without moving. Then he said very quietly, where's Cole? Up, Nyland said. Up where? That's the thing. The warden pulled off his gloves finger by finger. We backtracked him about 1.5 miles before we lost it. He didn't wander Walker. He didn't circle. He was moving with purpose, and he was moving uphill into the wind in a storm in the dark, and there is nothing up there. No road, no cabin, no way out. It's 40 miles of federal wilderness. He's got a sat phone. He's got a sat phone, and he has not used it, Nyland said. We've had the state monitoring since 2 o'clock. Not one transmission. Priya Raman spoke for the first time in an hour. Then he's not lost, she said. A lost man calls. Nyland nodded slowly. That's how I read it too, ma'am. Ethan Walker stood up and walked to the window and looked out at a parking lot with 3 news vans in it and snow coming sideways through the streetlights. Warden, he said, what was the temperature at 6.4 below, with wind 26 below? And tonight, Ward Nyland did not answer. Say it, Ethan said. Nobody's coming off that mountain alive tonight, Nyland said. Not him, not anybody who goes after him. I called it at 7, and I'll call it again at first light, and Brooks backed me, and I've got 11 volunteers in my truck who have families. Ethan stood at that window a long time. Then I need to ask you for something, he said. No, said Priya Raman. I need to be on that mountain at first light. Absolutely not. Ma'am. Ethan turned around. There are 2 men still unaccounted for, and one of them is Dale Whitmore, who is 57 years old with a bad heart, and a wife named Colleen, who has been standing at that turnout since 2 o'clock in the afternoon in a parka with no gloves on. I watched her out this window for an hour. She has been asking every single person who comes off that hill, and nobody will look at her. Ethan. I have been that woman, Ethan Walker said. I stood in a hallway in Virginia and watched people not look at me for 3 hours, and I have never gotten over it, and I am not going to be the reason somebody else does that. The room went very quiet. Priya Raman took her glasses off. If you go up there, she said, and you find Cole Harrison, and he is alive, and there are no witnesses, do you understand what that is? Yes. Say it. It's the end of my life either way, Ethan said. If he's dead, they'll say I did it. If he's alive, he'll say I did something. Then why? Ethan Walker looked at his lawyer. Because Boone Reyes is 19, he said, and I already went and got him, and I don't get to pick and choose which ones I'm willing to carry. They went up at 6:20 the next morning, which was Friday, with 14 people, 2 dog teams, and a state helicopter that got 11 minutes of flight time before the wind shut it back down. They found Dale Whitmore at 9:05. He was alive, barely and stupidly, and only because he had done the one thing everybody says to do and almost nobody does, which was to stop moving and get out of the wind. He had crawled into a hollow under a deadfall and pulled Duff over himself with his bare hands, and he had been in there for 26 hours. When they got him out, he grabbed Ethan Walker's coat with both frozen hands and would not let go. You, he said, don't talk. You yelled. Dale Whitmore's eyes were running, and it was not from the cold. You yelled at us. You told us go back to the trucks. I heard you, and I didn't go. Dale, why didn't I go? The man was sobbing now, a 57-year-old man in the snow with strangers holding his legs. It was right there. The truck was right there. Why didn't I go? And Ethan Walker, kneeling in the snow with a dying man's hands twisted in his coat, said the truest thing he had said in 4 years. Because you were more afraid of him than you were of the mountain, he said. And you were wrong, and you are gonna have the rest of your life to think about it, and I hope you use it. They carried him out onto the sked, and Colleen Whitmore ran 40 yards in unlaced boots and fell down twice getting to that ambulance. By Friday afternoon, there were 9 news vans. By Saturday morning, somebody in Helena leaked the thing that everybody had been waiting for, and it went out on a national wire at 11:40 a.m. And the headline said, "Missing Montana Outfitter Sought on Land, Owned by Decorated Navy SEAL Sniper." The record was thin, the way Brooks had said. 18 years, 9 of them not written down anywhere a reporter could get. But there was enough. There was a citation with the details blacked out. There was a photograph from 2009 that somebody's cousin had. There was a retired chief in Virginia Beach who said one sentence to a reporter and then hung up the phone, and the sentence was, "If Ethan Walker wanted a man found, that man is found." The town of Silver Fork stopped functioning. The diner had a line out the door. Merle Dunphy gave a press conference at 4 o'clock Saturday in which he used the phrase, "all avenues, including the conduct of the property owner," 11 times, and Priya Raman watched it on a phone in a motel room and said one word that Ethan had not known she was capable of. And the question got asked first on a message board, and then on the radio, and then on a Sunday morning national broadcast in exactly these words. Did Ethan Walker beat 5 men on his own mountain without ever firing a shot? Or did 5 men walk into the only warning they ever got and destroy themselves? On Sunday at 2 in the afternoon on day 4, the search found Cole Harrison's rifle. It was 11 miles into the federal wilderness at 9,000 feet on a ridge above a drainage that does not have a name, and it was leaning against a rock upright deliberately, the way a man sets a rifle down when he intends to come back for it. The magazine was full. There were 3 rounds missing from a box in his coat pocket, and Ward Nyland counted them out loud on camera and looked into the lens and said the time and the date because he knew exactly what those 3 rounds were. The coat was folded next to the rifle. Folded. A man who is freezing to death does not fold his coat. A man who is freezing to death does not set his rifle upright. A man who is freezing to death at the very end, when the body starts to burn, its last sometimes tears his own clothes off in a confusion that has a name in the literature, and the coat did not look torn off. It looked folded. And there was no sat phone. And leading away from that rock, going up, going deeper into 40 miles of country, where no road has ever been there, was a single set of boot prints in old crusted snow, and they were spaced too evenly, and they were not staggering, and they went over the ridge and out of the search area and into the kind of country where a man can be gone for 100 years. Ward Nyland stood on that ridge for a long time. Then he keyed his radio and said, "Dan, you're gonna want to come look at this yourself." And down in Silver Fork, in a room at the back of a sheriff's office, Ethan Walker heard those words come out of a speaker, and he stood up and he walked to the window and he looked north at his own mountain with a burned house on it and 400 acres of white timber running up into a wilderness that had just swallowed a man whole. And he said to nobody at all, "Where'd you go, Cole?" They did not find Cole Harrison on Sunday or Monday or in the 11 days after that, and by the second week, the story stopped being about a missing man and started being about Ethan Walker. It began at 9:40 on a Tuesday morning in a conference room in the county courthouse with Merle Dunphy sitting across a table from a woman who had driven 4 hours to be there. "Let me be direct," Dunphy said. "There's a great deal of interest in this office regarding your client's conduct." "Be direct then," Priya Raman said. "Which conduct?" "Marking hazards on his property 48 hours before 5 men entered it." "You mean posting warnings?" "I mean creating a documented map of every place a man could die," Dunphy said, and then declining to share it with anyone. "He emailed it to me at 6:11 on Tuesday morning. Mr. Dunphy and I forwarded a copy to Fish and Wildlife at 9 that same day, which is in your file, which I assume you have read." Priya did not raise her voice. "You want me to keep going, or you want to skip to the part where you tell me what you're actually building?" Dunphy folded his hands. There is a theory, he said, that your client engineered a confrontation. There's a theory the moon landing was filmed in Nevada. Miss Rahman, he was 300 yards uphill in the dark, and he yelled at them to go back, she said. Twice. That's not my client's word. That's Tyler Voss's word on Warden Island's body camera, given in a rescue sled at 5:50 in the evening, while the man believed he was dying, which makes it about the most reliable statement a human being can make. Statements given under duress. You'd rather he told you when he felt comfortable. Dunphy's jaw tightened. There are 4 dead or missing men. There are 2 dead men, 1 missing man, and 2 survivors who are both begging to testify against the missing one, Priya said. Shh. And there is a burned house. Whose house was it, Mr. Dunphy? Say it out loud. I'd like to hear you say whose house burned down. The county attorney did not say it. I intend to present the entire matter to a grand jury, he said. Good, said Priya Raman. Present it. She walked out to her car, sat down behind the wheel, and called Ethan Walker at 11:02 in the morning. He's going to the grand jury. Ethan was quiet for a second. On me. On everything, which means on you. She started the engine and did not put it in gear. Ethan, listen. Grand juries are not trials. There's no defense, no cross, no judge sitting there keeping him honest. He gets to stand in a room with 16 people from this county and tell them a story for 2 days with nobody arguing back. And if they indict, then you're arraigned and it's on every network in America by supper time, and you spend 3 years and everything you have left. And if they don't, then he's finished, she said, in this county forever. Ethan looked out the window of Walt Jennings' spare bedroom, where he had been sleeping on a twin mattress for 19 days with a dog on the floor beside him. Priya, yeah. Do it fast, he said. I'm tired. The grand jury convened on a Thursday 3 weeks to the day from the fire. It sat for 4 days. On the first day, Merle Dunphy laid out the property, the map, the ribbons, the military record, with 9 years of holes in it, and a photograph of a burned foundation, and he used the word trained 14 times. On the second day, he called Warden Island. That was where it started to come apart. Warden Island, you accompanied Mr. Walker onto the mountain on the day of the fire. I did. Whose idea was that? Sheriff Brooks's and mine, and I'd do it again. Did Mr. Walker ask to go? Yes, sir. Doesn't that strike you as unusual? A man inserting himself into a search for people who had just tried to kill him. Warden Island leaned forward. Mr. Dunphy, he said, I've been a warden 33 years. I have gone up that range 41 times for lost people. And I want to say something to these folks here because I don't get asked, and I'm going to say it now. Boone Reyes was 19 years old, and he had about 2 hours left in him when we got there, and the only reason we found him in 2 hours instead of 6 is that Ethan Walker knew a piece of ground I did not know. That kid is alive because of him. That kid's mother knows it. That kid knows it. Warden, and Dale Whitmore, Nyland said, is alive because that man walked back up a mountain in a whiteout for people who burned his house down. And you can call that suspicious if you want to. Down where I work, we call it a rescue. Dunphy dismissed him at 11:40 in the morning. On the third day, 3 things happened in a row that ended Merle Dunphy's career. At 9:15, Kyle Merrick took the oath in a shirt his mother had ironed and put a $2 spiral notebook on the table and read from it for 2 hours and 10 minutes, page by page, date by date, in his own handwriting. Starting with the day, Cole Harrison handed him a Ziploc bag of raw hamburger and said it'll make her sick a couple days. He cried twice. He did not stop reading. At noon, a woman on that grand jury asked him a question, which they are allowed to do. Son, she said, why'd you write it all down? Kyle Merrick looked at his hands. Because Mr. Walker told me to, he said. The man I poisoned the dog on. He told me to write it down and keep it out of my house, and I asked him why not my house, and he said because your house can burn down. The room went very quiet. He said that in October, the woman asked. October 11th, ma'am, Kyle said. It's on the first page. At 1:30 in the afternoon, the state brought in the sat phone records, not the county, the state, because 11 days earlier, the Montana Attorney General's office had taken jurisdiction over the conduct of the Silver Fork Sheriff's Department after Daniel Brooks personally drove Roy Prine's phone to Helena and handed it across a desk and said, I need somebody who don't eat dinner in this county. The records were read out loud by an analyst named Grace Okafor, And they were 4 pages long, and they took 11 minutes, and by minute 3, you could hear people breathing. Cole Harrison's satellite phone had transmitted 4 times on the morning of the fire. The first was at 4:35 in the morning, incoming 91 seconds from a number registered to Deputy Roy Prine. The second was at 5:12 in the morning and outgoing 6 minutes and 40 seconds to a law office in Billings. The third was at 6:58 in the morning, outgoing 44 seconds to his own wife. The fourth was at 9:20 in the morning, outgoing 11 seconds to a voicemail box belonging to a man in Houston who had paid a deposit on a hunt. There was no call to 911. There was no call to the sheriff. There was no call to search and rescue. There was no call to any emergency service of any kind at any hour on any day ever. The analyst set the pages down. To be clear, Dunphy said, and his voice had changed, and everybody heard it change, the device was functional. The device was functional and had signal at every point where it was used, Grace Okafor said. It's a satellite unit. It works anywhere with sky. It worked at 9:20 in the morning in the storm at elevation. So at 9:20. At 9:20 in the morning, she said, Cole Harrison had a working phone in his coat, 4 men from his own crew scattered across that mountain in a whiteout, and he used it to leave a voicemail about a hunting deposit. Somebody on that grand jury said out loud, "Oh my God." Merle Dunphy stood at the front of that room with 4 pages of paper in his hand and no idea what to do with them, because he had subpoenaed those records to prove that Ethan Walker had been on the mountain, and instead he had proved that Cole Harrison had chosen with a phone in his hand 4 separate times to let his own men freeze rather than admit what he had done. The grand jury returned on the 4th day at 2:15 in the afternoon. They declined to indict Ethan Walker on any count. They returned true bills against Cole Harrison on 11 counts, including arson, attempted deliberate homicide, and negligent homicide in the death of Richard Dunn, against Roy Prine on 4 counts, including official misconduct and obstruction, and against the name nobody in the gallery expected, which was Merle Dunphy's own chief investigator. Priya Raman walked out of that courthouse at 2:40 in the afternoon and found Ethan Walker sitting on the tailgate of Walt Jennings's truck with a dog. "It's over," she said. He nodded slowly. "That's it. That's it. No charges. Not now, not later, and I've got it in writing." She sat down on the tailgate next to him, which she had never done. "Ethan, are you going to say anything?" Ethan Walker looked across the street at nothing. "Rick Dunn had a daughter," he said. "She's 11. She was at the funeral in a coat that was too big for her." "That is not your fault." "I know it isn't." He rubbed his eyes with the heels of both hands. "That's the part that I can't get anybody to understand. I know it isn't. And I keep seeing that coat." Priya Raman was quiet a moment. "You know what I do for a living," she said. "I have sat with a lot of men who beat something. Every one of them wanted to celebrate. I don't want to celebrate." "No," she said, "I noticed." Winter closed the mountain in December. They suspended the search on the 4th of that month with 1,400 acres of federal wilderness under 6 feet of snow, and Warden Island told the press in a sentence that got quoted for a week, "He is up there. The country will give him back when it's ready, and not one day sooner." Ethan Walker spent that winter in a 14-foot travel trailer parked on his own burned foundation with a generator, and a stack of insurance forms. Walt Jennings came up every Sunday with groceries and did not ask questions. In February, Boone Reyes came up the road on foot because his truck wouldn't make the grade and stood in front of that trailer for a long time before he knocked. Ethan opened the door. "Boone." "Mr. Walker." The kid had lost 2 fingertips, and there was a lot of him that had not come back. "I ain't here to ask nothing." "All right. I got sentenced Tuesday. 2 years suspended, 400 hours, and I got to pay restitution the rest of my life, probably." He swallowed. "The judge said the state asked for leniency because I testified, and then he said something else. He said the property owner wrote a letter." Ethan did not say anything. "Did you write a letter?" "I did." Boone Reyes's face came apart right there in the snow. "Why, because you were 19, Ethan said, "and I already told you that once." "That ain't a reason." "Son." Ethan came down the step. "You want a better one? Here it is. I have known 100 men who did something because a man they were scared of told them to. Some of them were good men. The difference between them and you is that you got caught at 23 instead of 40. That's the whole difference. That's all of it." Boone stood there crying in the snow with the 2 fingers gone. What am I supposed to do now? Work, Ethan said. And when somebody bigger than you tells you to do something wrong, you say no out loud where people can hear you. That's it. That's the entire rest of it. They found Cole Harrison on the 9th of May. A Forest Service crew clearing a trail 11 miles into the wilderness found him in a talus field at 8,600 feet, a mile and a half beyond the ridge where his rifle had been standing upright since November. He was on his back. The coat was not with him because the coat had been folded 11 miles behind, and the state medical examiner in Missoula gave that fact a name that made the whole thing land like a stone. Paradoxical undressing, she told Daniel Brooks on the phone at 4 in the afternoon. It's late stage. The vessels dilate the body floods with warmth that isn't there, and the person feels like they're burning. They take their clothes off. They fold them sometimes. They tidy up. They set things in order. So the rifle. Terminal burrowing and ordering behavior, she said. It's documented. They arrange objects. They crawl into small spaces. Sheriff, I've seen it 11 times in 22 years, and the families always think somebody staged it. Nobody staged it. And the direction, Brooks said, he went up. He went 11 more miles up. Hypothermia takes judgment first, the examiner said. It's the very first thing to go before the shivering even stops. He wasn't running to anything, and he wasn't hiding from anything. By the time he set that rifle down, Sheriff, he didn't know what a rifle was. Daniel Brooks sat with that for a moment. Was there a phone on him? In his front pants pocket, she said. Battery dead. The state pulled it Tuesday. And there was a pause. There's one message, she said. Composed. Never sent. Timestamp 9:22 in the morning, 2 minutes after that voicemail he left about the hunting deposit. Who's it to? His wife. What's it say? The medical examiner read it, and Daniel Brooks wrote it down word for word on the back of a citation pad, and it was 14 words long. It said, I think I made a mistake up here. Tell the boys I said go. Brooks looked at that for a long time. He wrote that at 9:22, he said, yes. And he never sent it. No. 2 minutes after he called Houston about a deposit. That's correct. Daniel Brooks put the phone down on his desk and put both hands flat beside it and sat in a small office in a small town and thought about the fact that a man had been given one clear window of grace at 9:22 in the morning with a working satellite phone and 4 men still alive, and had written out the truth with his thumbs and then had not been able to make himself press the last button. That's the whole thing, he said out loud. That's the whole damn thing right there. He drove up the mountain on the 15th of May. The road was better than it had been. Somebody had put gravel on the switchback. The gate was steel and it was open, and there was a new foundation poured where the old one had been, and a frame going up on it, and a man on a ladder with a nail gun. Ruby met the cruiser 20 yards out and escorted it in like she owned the county. Ethan Walker came down off the ladder. Sheriff? Ethan. You want coffee? I got a percolator and a camp stove, and that's the whole kitchen. I'd take coffee. They sat on 2 upturned buckets. Brooks took his hat off and turned it in his hands a while before he said anything. They found him. I heard it on the radio. You hear the rest? No. So Daniel Brooks told him. The talus field, the folded coat 11 miles back, the rifle standing upright, paradoxical undressing and terminal burrowing, and the fact that judgment is the first thing hypothermia takes before a man even stops shivering. Ethan listened without moving. Then Brooks took a folded citation pad out of his shirt pocket. There's one more thing, and I've been arguing with myself for 6 days about whether to bring it up here. Bring it. There's an unsent message on his phone, 9:22 in the morning, to his wife. Brooks handed the paper across. I wrote it out. Ethan Walker unfolded it and read 14 words. He read them twice. Then he sat there on an upturned bucket in the middle of a construction site and did not say anything for a long, long time, and Daniel Brooks let him have it. Tell the boys I said go, Ethan finally said. Yeah, he knew. He knew at 9:22 in the morning, Brooks said. Rick Dunn was still alive at 9:22. Dale Whitmore was still walking. Tyler still had all his toes. Ethan handed the paper back. Sheriff, can I tell you the thing I've never said to anybody? Go ahead. When I stood on that ridge and watched my house burn, Ethan said I wanted him dead. Not scared, not arrested, dead. And I stood there and I did the arithmetic on it, the actual arithmetic, how long it would take, and where I'd stand, and what I'd say afterward. And I want you to know that I didn't turn away from it because I'm a good man. Then why? Because a friend of mine died in 2016, and the last thing I ever told him was that I was going to go somewhere nothing happens. Ethan's voice stayed even, and his eyes did not. And if I'd gone down that hill, then everything that man believed about me was wrong, and he's not here to be wrong about it. He only gets what I do. That's all that's left of him. Daniel Brooks looked at the ground. Ethan, he said, the reason I drove up here isn't the phone. No. There's a story going around this county, and I want you to hear it from me before some fool at the diner says it to your face. Brooks put his hat back on. There's people who think you did it, not with your hands. They think you walked them up there, hurted them. Some of them say it like an accusation, and I'm going to be honest with you, more of them say it like a compliment, and that's worse. I know. You know, Walt told me in March. Ethan almost smiled. He said, son, half this town thinks you're a monster, and the other half wants to buy you a beer for it, and I can't decide which half I'd rather never talk to again. Brooks laughed once tiredly. So what do you want me to say to them? Ethan Walker stood up and looked out across 400 acres of green timber that had been white 5 weeks earlier, and at a fence line he had rebuilt twice. Tell them I fixed my fence, he said. Tell them I filed 41 reports in 6 months, and every one of them was true. Tell them I yelled at 5 men in the dark to go back to their trucks, and 2 of them did not, and 1 of them did, and he's alive. Tell them I never touched a soul. That's not a legend. No, Ethan said, it isn't. That's the point of it. Brooks stood. One more thing, and then I'll get out of your way. He held out his hand. There hasn't been a single wildlife violation reported in this drainage since November. Not one. Nyland says elk are back in the North Bench first time in 9 years, and there's a cow with twins in the meadow where Colt used to run his clients. Ethan shook his hand. That's the only part of any of this that was ever the point, he said. They're not staying out because they're scared of you, Brooks said. I want you to understand that too because I think it matters to you. They're staying out because for the first time in 31 years, everybody in this county watched a line get held. That's all it ever takes. One time. He walked to his cruiser and opened the door, then stopped. Ethan, Sheriff, that message. Brooks tapped his shirt pocket. Tell the boys I said go. He wrote it and he couldn't send it. I know. You know why he couldn't? Ethan Walker looked up at the ridge where he had stood at 4 a.m. with his phone in his hand and everything he owned burning below him. Because sending it meant saying out loud that he was wrong, he said, and there's men who'd rather die 11 miles up a mountain than do that. Daniel Brooks got in his car. He did, he said. That's exactly what he did. The cruiser was gone 20 minutes before Ethan Walker climbed back up the ladder, and he got 4 nails in before his hands quit working right, and he had to come down and sit on the bucket again. He sat there until the light changed. That was the 11th of May, and the man who came up the road on the 12th was wearing loafers. Ethan saw the rental car from 400 yards out and knew what it was before the door opened, because a rental car on a gravel switchback drives like an animal that has never been outdoors. Mr. Walker. The man had a card out before his feet were on the ground. Devin Marsh, I'm with a production company out of Los Angeles. I've been trying your attorney for 6 weeks. She told me. She's very good at not returning calls. That's what I pay her for. Devin Marsh laughed like they were already friends. I'll be quick. There's a feature interest in this story. Real interest network level. We're talking limited series 8 episodes, and I want to be straight with you about the number because I think you'll respect that. He said the number. Ethan Walker set his nail gun down on the plywood. Say it again. Marsh said it again. It was more money than Ethan Walker had made in 18 years of service. It was enough to rebuild the house 4 times and put a well on the North Bench and hire a man to help him and never worry about a winter again as long as he lived. Huh, Ethan said. I know it's a lot to take in. It isn't. Ethan picked the nail gun back up. No, thank you. Marsh blinked. Mr. Walker, I don't think you heard I heard it fine. May I ask why? Ethan came down 2 rungs so he could look at the man properly. There's a woman in Silver Fork named Angela Dunn, he said. Her husband went off a ledge on my property in November. She's got a girl 11 years old, and that girl is going to be able to type her father's name into a phone for the rest of her life. Right now, what comes up is a news story. You want to make it a television show. We'd be extremely sensitive to You'd be extremely sensitive to it for 8 hours, Ethan said, and she's got 60 years. Marsh stood in the dirt with his cards still out. There are other people involved, he said. Somebody's going to make it eventually. It might as well be someone who consults you. That may be true. Then why not take the money? Ethan Walker looked at him for a long moment. Because I already got paid, he said. Nobody's hunted this drainage since November. That was the whole invoice. The rental car went back down the switchback at 11:50 in the morning, and Ethan did not watch it go. He drove into town on Friday for lumber, which he had been putting off for 3 weeks, and that was the day it finally happened. The diner had 11 people in it. Ethan came in for coffee because Walt had asked him to meet there, and he was 4 steps inside when a man at the counter turned around on his stool. His name was Dwayne Kerr. He had guided 2 seasons for Harrison Outfitters in the 90s and had told anybody who would listen since December that the whole thing stank. "Whoa," Kerr said loud. "There he is." The room went quiet in that particular way. A room goes quiet. "Morning," Ethan said. 4 men, Kerr said. 4 men on your mountain. 2 men. 2 dead, 2 crippled. That's 4. Then it's 4, Ethan said. "You're right." That threw Kerr off for half a second, which is what agreeing does. "You gonna stand there and tell me you didn't run him?" "I'm not gonna tell you anything, Dwayne, because I know what a man like you can do." Kerr's voice was climbing. "I read what they said about you. 9 years the government won't even admit happened. And I'm supposed to believe 5 men just wandered off in a snowstorm on your ground, and you had ribbons up 2 days early like a man setting a table." Ethan Walker stood there and let him finish and did not move, and every person in that diner watched him not move. "You're a killer," Dwayne Kerr said. "You just found a legal way to do it." And then a chair scraped in the back. Colleen Whitmore was 54 years old and 5'1", and she came up the aisle of that diner with a coffee cup still in her hand. "Dwayne Kerr," she said, "you sit down." "Colleen, you sit down." She got right up in front of him, and Kerr, who had 4 inches and 80 pounds on her, leaned back on his stool. "My husband was on that mountain." "I know he was. My husband was on that mountain, and I stood at that turnout for 26 hours, and I want to tell you and everybody in this room what happened, because I have heard your version at this counter every Friday since Christmas, and I've been polite about it, and I am done being polite." Nobody in that diner breathed. "Dale heard him," Colleen said. "My husband. He was 300 yards down in the dark, and he heard that man," she pointed at Ethan without looking at him, "yell at them to go back to their trucks, twice. He told them about the storm before it come in, and Cole Harrison told them he was lying. And my Dale believed Cole Harrison because he believed Cole Harrison for 11 years, and that is the sin. That's the sin, Dwayne, not ribbons on a tree. Colleen, all I'm saying is," and then that man walked back up that hill in a whiteout after we'd all been told it wasn't survivable, and he found my husband under a deadfall, and he got down in the snow and put his own hands on Dale's feet. Her voice broke and she did not stop. "My husband helped burn his house down, and that man knelt in the snow and warmed his feet." She turned around and looked at the whole room. "So the next one of you that says he's a killer," Colleen Whitmore said, "can say it in front of me and then can explain to me who I'm supposed to have made supper for last night." She walked back to her booth and sat down. Dwayne Kerr looked at his eggs. Ethan Walker stood there and did not know what to do with his hands. Walt Jennings, who had been in the corner the entire time and had not said one word, got up, walked over and said, "Sit down, son. Your coffee's coming." Ethan sat. "You set that up," he said quietly. "I did not." "Walt." "I told her you'd be here at 9, Walt said. "That's a different thing entirely." "Angela Dunn came up the mountain on the 2nd of June. She parked at the gate and did not come through it, which Ethan understood better than anything anybody had done for him in 6 months, and he walked down and stood on his side of it. "Mrs. Dunn, I'm not going to shake your hand." "No, ma'am." She was 38 and she looked 50, and she had her arms crossed so tight it looked like she was holding herself together, which she was. "I've read all of it," she said. "The grand jury, the warden's transcript, the phone records. I've read every page 4 times." "All right, so I know." Her chin was shaking. I know he had a phone. I know Rick asked him to call. I know Rick hit him and Cole put a rifle on him, and I know my husband was still alive at 9:20 in the morning when that man was leaving a voicemail about a deposit. Yes, ma'am. So I know it isn't you. Her voice cracked wide open. I know it isn't you, and I need it to be you, Mr. Walker. And I have been driving past this road for 6 months trying to make it be you, because if it's Cole, then my husband was a coward. And if my husband was a coward, then I married one, and I have got a daughter who thinks her daddy was a hero. Ethan Walker stood there and took that the way a man takes weather. Can I say something, he said. I don't know. Then I'll say it, and you can leave if it's wrong. He put one hand on the top rail of his own gate. Your husband was the only one of the 5 who told Cole Harrison no. Angela Dunn stopped crying all at once the way people do when something surprises them. What? At the fence in October, he was the one running that crew, and he was ugly about it. I'm not going to lie to you and tell you he was a good man to me because he wasn't. Ethan's voice stayed even. But on that mountain at 6 in the morning, when everybody was scared and cold, and Cole said we walk out on our own and nobody says a word, your husband was the one who said no. He asked for the phone, and when Cole wouldn't give it up, he hit him and grabbed for it. Boone said that to a warden with a camera on in the snow when he thought he was dying. Ethan let that sit. Mrs. Dunn, 4 men on that hill did what Cole told them. One man tried to call for help. That's the one you married. Angela Dunn put both hands over her face and stood at a stranger's gate and made a sound that Ethan would remember for the rest of his life. He did not touch her. He waited. When she could talk, she said, he was going to quit in August. He told me. He said Cole was getting worse, and he said, I don't want to be there when it goes bad. She wiped her face with the heel of her hand. And then he stayed because of the money and because he was 51 and he didn't know how to do anything else, and I let him stay, Mr. Walker. I let him because I like the money too. Ma'am, don't. Ma'am, listen to me. Ethan leaned on the gate. I've spent 19 years around men who stayed too long in a bad thing. There is not one of them who didn't have a reason, and there is not one of them whose wife didn't tell herself the same thing you're telling yourself right now. She looked at him. You've got a mean way of being kind, she said. I've been told. Angela Dunn stood there a moment longer. Hannah's 11, she said. She wants to know if you hate him. No, ma'am. Would you tell her that? If you ever want me to, Ethan said. I will tell her that, and I will tell her the thing I just told you about the phone, and I will tell her it in front of you so you know I didn't add anything to it. Angela Dunn nodded and got in her car and then rolled the window down. Mr. Walker? Yes. They're auctioning the outfit, she said. Harrison's place. The whole 160 acres in the shop and the lease rights. August 14, and there's a man from Texas already been out to walk it. Ethan Walker felt something go cold in the middle of him. A man from Texas. He's been telling people he's going to reopen it, Angela said. Same name, same country. He asked Dwayne Kerr to guide for him. She drove off, and Ethan Walker stood at his gate and understood with a kind of sick clarity that everything he had bled for since October had a 160-acre door in it, and the door was standing open. Roy Prine was sentenced on the 19th of June. 22 months, and it would have been more, except he cooperated, and the cooperation was the thing that finished the county. Ethan sat in the third row with Priya Raymond beside him and listened to a 44-year-old deputy explain under oath that he had passed information to Cole Harrison 11 times over 6 years that he had never once been paid in money, and that the actual arrangement was a great deal more ordinary and more shameful than money. He gave me elk, Roy Prine said. That's it. That's the whole thing. Every fall, he'd put a bull in my freezer, and every fall I'd tell myself it was just a neighbor thing. When did it stop being a neighbor thing? The judge asked. Prine was quiet a long time. Your Honor, he said. I don't know. That's the honest answer, and it's the worst one. There wasn't a day. There wasn't one day where I said, all right, now I'm crooked. It just got a little further every year, and I never once had to decide. In the hallway afterward, he came right at Ethan, and 2 deputies moved, and Prine stopped and put his hands up. I ain't gonna do nothing, he said. Mr. Walker, can I say something to you? Go ahead. That morning, Prine's face was gray. When you called it in and you said the time out loud, 4:33, you said it like you were reading it off a paper. I was. I knew right then. Prine swallowed. I knew right then that I was already done. And I wrote 5:26 anyway. I sat there and wrote a lie I knew wouldn't hold because I'd been doing it so long I didn't have any other move. Why are you telling me this? Because everybody keeps asking how a whole county went bad, Roy Prine said. And it ain't complicated. It's just that nobody ever said no out loud where it cost them anything. And then you showed up and did it about 41 times in 6 months in writing, and the whole thing fell over. He shook his head. You didn't beat us, mister. You just filed paperwork until we couldn't stand it. They took him out the side door. Priya Raman watched him go and said, that is the closest thing to a eulogy for this county I expect to hear. The federal agents came on the 8th of July. There were 2 of them, a woman named Special Agent Renata Voss, no relation to Tyler, and a man from the U.S. Attorney's Office in Billings. And they sat in Ethan's half-framed house on upturned buckets and drank his percolator coffee and put a binder on the plywood between them. Mr. Walker, do you know what the Lacey Act is? I know it's federal, and I know it's about wildlife. It's about transport. Agent Voss opened the binder. It's a federal felony to transport illegally taken wildlife across a state line, which is not something a county attorney can bury. All right. We've been looking at Harrison Outfitters for 2.5 years, she said, quietly, and we could never get past the county because every witness we approached had a cousin who guided or a brother who hauled, and every complaint died in Silver Fork. Ethan set his cup down. And then a woman named Priya Raman started sending our Helena office a package every Friday, Agent Voss said. Beginning in October, 41 incident reports, photographs with date stamps, plate numbers, camera footage with time codes, a hazard map, a dispatch log discrepancy of 53 minutes. She tapped the binder. Mr. Walker, in 19 years, I have never received a civilian file like this one, ever. Not close. It was just a notebook. It was a chain of custody, she said. You built one without being asked to, in a spiral notebook on a mountain alone. The man from the U.S. Attorney's Office leaned forward. Here's what it opened up, he said. Harrison Outfitters ran clients from 9 states for 21 years. We've now got 206 illegally taken animals documented, including 41 bull elk off federal wilderness under a permit. He never held 12 bighorn and a grizzly in 2018 that he told a client was a legal bear. Ethan sat back slowly. 21 years. 21 years, Agent Voss said. And you want the part that's going to keep you up. It was never really about your 700 acres. Your 700 acres was the gate. It's the only ground you can drive a side-by-side through to reach 11,000 acres of federal wilderness without crossing a Forest Service check station. Ethan looked at her. That's why he offered me $25,000. That's why he offered you $25,000 for hunting rights on land he described to his own clients as marginal, she said. You didn't buy a mountain, Mr. Walker. You bought his front door and you locked it. Nobody said anything for a moment. How many people are you charging? Ethan asked. 14 so far, the prosecutor said. 9 outfitters, 3 taxidermists in 2 states, a charter pilot, and a processor in Idaho. He closed the binder. It's the largest wildlife trafficking case in the history of this district, and it starts with a retired sailor writing down license plates. At the door, Agent Voss stopped. Can I ask you something off the record? Everybody says that to me. There's a version of this, she said, where you sold him access in October, took the $25,000. Then never had one bad night. Nobody would ever have known. Why didn't you? Ethan Walker thought about it honestly, which took a few seconds. Because I'd have known, he said. The auction was set for the 14th of August, and by the end of July, the man from Texas had a name, and the name was Gil Prentice, and he had money, and he had already put a deposit on a lodge in Ennis. Ethan Walker did not have money. The insurance had paid out on the cabin, and the cabin had eaten every dollar of it, and then some. He had $11,000 in the world, and a truck with 240,000 miles on it. He sat in Walt Jennings's kitchen on the 2nd of August with a calculator and a legal pad and did the arithmetic 4 different ways and got the same answer every time. It's not close, he said. How not close? They'll open at 400 and it'll go past 6. Ethan pushed the pad away. Walt, I couldn't buy the shop building. Walt Jennings poured coffee neither of them wanted. So what happens? So Prentice buys it, and he's got the lease rights on the Forest Service parcels, and he's got Dwayne Kerr guiding, and in 3 years, it's exactly what it was. Ethan rubbed his face. Except this time, everybody's already learned that nothing happens. Nothing happens. Walt set the pot down hard. Son Cole Harrison is dead in a talus field, and his deputies in Deer Lodge, and Merle Dunphy's got a primary challenger for the first time in 18 years. And in 5 years, there'll be a new Cole. Then we'll do it again. Ethan looked up. We, he said. That's what I come in here to say, and you keep interrupting me. Walt sat down. There's a thing called a land trust. Montana Mountain Legacy out of Bozeman. I called him. You called them? I'm 79 years old, Ethan. I got a phone and nothing to do. Walt slid a folded paper across the table. They buy ground like that, not for money for keeping. Conservation easement, public access for hiking, no commercial outfitting, ever deed restricted permanent. They'd have to raise $600,000 in 12 days. They'd have to raise 400, Walt said. There's federal habitat money for the rest, and the warden's already put the paperwork in, and Ethan, there's one other thing that makes it a whole lot easier than $400,000 usually is. What? Walt Jennings tapped the paper. Everybody in America knows about this mountain, he said. You wouldn't take the television money, somebody ought to. The fundraiser opened on the 4th of August with a page on the internet and a photograph of an elk that Warden Island had taken on the North Bench in June. It did $411,000 in 9 days, 1,800 donors. A retired school teacher in Ohio sent $4. A hunting outfitter in Wyoming, who had never met anybody involved, sent $25,000 and a note that said the rest of us have to live with what men like that did to our name. And on the 11th of August, 3 days before the auction, a woman knocked on the frame of Ethan Walker's unfinished front door. He knew who she was before he turned around. Marion Harrison was 53, and she had her hair pulled back, and she was wearing a coat that was too warm for August, the way people do when they have not been paying attention to themselves for a while. Mr. Walker, Ethan set down the sander. Mrs. Harrison, I've been sitting at the bottom of your road for 1 hour and 10 minutes, she said. I'd like credit for coming up. You've got it. May I sit? There's buckets. She sat on a bucket in the middle of a house her husband had burned down, and she put her purse on her knees and held it with both hands. I want to tell you 2 things, she said, and then I'm going to leave, and I don't expect you to want to see me again. All right. The first thing is about the auction. I figured. No, you didn't. Marion Harrison looked up. I own it, not the estate, me. My daddy's money bought that 160 acres in 1991, and it's been in my name for 35 years because Cole had a judgment against him in Idaho when we bought it, and he couldn't have his name on anything. Ethan sat down slowly on the other bucket. There's no auction, he said. There's an auction if I say there is. Her mouth was tight. Gil Prentice offered me $640,000 cash in June. He offered me $675 in July. He called me Tuesday and said $700, and I hung up on him. Why? Because he wants the name, she said. He asked me if the name conveyed. He wants to put Harrison Outfitters back on that gate. Ethan Walker did not say anything. I've got 2 boys, Marion said, 26 and 22. One of them's changed his last name and the other one won't answer the phone. And that man wants to hang my husband's name back up on a gate because it's worth money to him. She looked up and her eyes were perfectly dry and perfectly furious. I'll burn it to the ground first, and I'll tell you what Mr. Walker in this family that's not a figure of speech. What do you want to do? I want to sell it to your land trust for $211,000, she said. Ethan stared at her. That's 1/3 of what it's worth. It's what's left on the note. I don't need a profit. I need it gone, and I want the deed to say what it's for. She opened her purse and took out a folded paper. No commercial hunting ever, not by anybody. Written into the ground so my grandchildren can't undo it if they get greedy, because Mr. Walker, in my experience, they get greedy. Ethan took the paper. You could give it to anybody. I could? Why me? And Marion Harrison finally looked away out the window frame at 700 acres of somebody else's mountain. That's the second thing, she said. All right. He called me at 6:58 in the morning. Her voice went flat and careful like a woman reading a list. 44 seconds. You've seen the records. Everybody's seen the records. Nobody has ever asked me what he said, and I have never once volunteered it, and I have been carrying it for 9 months, and I'm done. Ethan Walker put the paper down on his knee. You don't have to. I do have to. She took a breath. He said, something's happened up here, and it's bad, and I can't undo it. And I said, Cole, where are you? And he said, listen to me. If this comes out wrong, you tell them Walker started it. You tell them he came at us. Say it exactly like that. Walker came at us. The half-built house was very quiet. And I said, is anybody hurt? Marion Harrison's hands were shaking now. And he said, not yet. And then he hung up on me. Ethan sat there. Not yet, he said. Not yet. At 6:58 in the morning. She pressed her lips together hard. Rick Dunn was alive at 6:58. Dale was walking. And he called me his wife from a working satellite phone in a blizzard with his own men freezing, and he did not use those 44 seconds to save one of them. He used them to build his story. Mrs. Harrison. Let me finish or I won't get through it. She held up a hand. I have thought about those 44 seconds every night since. And I've come to understand something about the man I was married to for 29 years, and it's this. He was never trying to get away with anything. He was trying to be right. That's all he ever wanted his whole life, was to be the one who was right, and by 6:58 that morning, the only way left to be right was for you to be the villain. Ethan Walker looked at the floor of his house. He wrote you another one, he said, at 9:22. I know. The sheriff read it to me in his office, and I fell out of the chair. Her voice finally broke. I think I made a mistake up here. Tell the boys I said go. 2.5 hours later, he got there. He got there, Mr. Walker. He actually got there, and he could not press the button. No, Dean. Why couldn't he press the button? And Ethan Walker gave her the only answer he had, which was the same one he had given Daniel Brooks on a bucket in May. Because pressing it meant saying he was wrong, he said, and he'd spent 55 years arranging his whole life so he'd never have to. Marion Harrison nodded over and over like a woman agreeing with something she had known for a long time and had needed to hear in somebody else's voice. That's what I think too, she said. She stood up. $211,000, she said. Have your trust call me Monday. And Mr. Walker, if the price offends you, understand that I am not being generous. I am buying something. What? The right to tell my sons, Marion Harrison said, that the last thing this family did with that ground was give it back. She walked out to her car and then stopped and turned around one more time. The 44 seconds, she said. You're the only living person who knows what was in it besides me. I'll keep it. No. She shook her head. That's not what I'm asking. I want you to say it. When they ask you what happened up here, I want you to say that Cole Harrison had a phone and used it on me. I've testified to it in a federal deposition, and I'll say it in open court, and I would like it once to come out of a mouth that isn't mine. Yes, ma'am. Thank you, said Marion Harrison and drove down the mountain. The trust closed on the Harrison place on the 22nd of September. 911 acres of combined ground went under permanent easement on the same day 700 of it. Ethan Walker's in the deed language was 11 pages long, and the only sentence anybody ever quoted was the one Warden Island wrote himself. This ground shall not be sold for the killing of animals for money in perpetuity. They put a sign at the county road, and there was a small argument about what to put on it, and it went on for 2 meetings, and in the end it said, Harrison Dunn Preserve, open to the public on foot. No motorized vehicles, no commercial hunting. Ethan had fought for that name for 3 weeks and had lost every argument until he made the last one, which was to Angela Dunn's face in her kitchen with her daughter listening from the hallway. Both names, he said, or I pull my ground out of it. You can't put Cole's name next to my husband's. It isn't Cole's name, Ethan said. It's Marion's. She's the one who signed it. And Angela, in 20 years, nobody's going to know which Harrison it was, but every single person who walks through that gate is going to see the name Dunn on a preserve, and somebody's going to ask a kid what it means. Angela Dunn stood at her sink with her back to him for a long time. You fight dirty, she said. I fight the same way every time. From the hallway, an 11-year-old voice said, Is it my dad? Ethan Walker turned around. Hannah Dunn was standing in the doorway in socks, holding the frame the way kids do when they have been listening and know they were not supposed to be. Yes, he said, it's your dad. Why? And Ethan Walker got down on one knee in a kitchen in Silver Fork, Montana, and told an 11-year-old girl the thing he had promised her mother he would tell her. Because on the worst morning of his life, he said, when everybody around him was scared and doing what a bad man told them to do, your father was the only one who asked for the phone. He asked for it, and they wouldn't give it to him, and he took a swing at a man twice his size to try and get it. Hannah Dunn's mouth was trembling. He was trying to call for help. He was trying to call for help. For who? For everybody, Ethan said, including me. The girl came off the door frame and crossed that kitchen and hugged a man her mother had spent 6 months trying to hate, and Angela Dunn stood at the sink with her hands over her mouth. Kyle Merrick got 2 years suspended and 800 hours in October, 1 year to the day. From the notebook. He served the hours on the preserve. Warden Island put him on a chainsaw and a fence stretcher and a shovel. And by the second spring, Kyle Merrick could read a game trail better than men who had hunted their whole lives. And in April of the third year, the state hired him as a seasonal habitat technician at $19 an hour with a state truck. His mother called Ethan Walker to tell him and cried so hard on the phone, she had to hand it to Kyle. She's a mess, Kyle said. She's earned it. Mr. Walker, the kid cleared his throat. They asked me at the office how I got interested in wildlife work. What did you say? There was a pause. I told them the truth, Kyle Merrick said. I said I poisoned a tree when I was 23 because a man told me to, and I've been paying it off ever since, and I'd rather say it out loud than have somebody find it. Ethan Walker closed his eyes. Say that again. I'd rather say it out loud. Kyle. Sir. That's the whole thing, Ethan said. That's the entire thing right there. You understand that that's what none of them could do. The package from Virginia Beach came in November, 11 days after the second anniversary of the fire. It had no note on the outside, and Ethan Walker signed for it at the post office in Silver Fork and put it on the seat and drove 11 miles before he pulled over because he had recognized the handwriting on the label and his hands had gone bad. Inside was a letter in a flat, rigid envelope. The letter was one page written in ballpoint by a woman named Dolores Bell, who was 71 years old and lived in Norfolk and had buried a son in 2016. She wrote that she had seen it on the news. She wrote that she had seen his name and had sat down on her own floor. She wrote that Marcus had called her from Virginia Beach in 2015 and told her about a chief who was going to go buy a mountain and live where nothing happened, and that she had laughed at it, and that Marcus had said, "No, Mama, he means it. That's a man who's had enough." She wrote that she was sorry about his house. And she wrote, "I have had this on my refrigerator for 10 years. Marcus sent it to me the week it was taken. I made a copy for myself, and this one is the original, and it belongs to you." Ethan Walker opened the flat envelope on the shoulder of a county road with the truck running. 2 men on a tailgate at Little Creek. One of them 40 looking 30, the other one 29 laughing with his mouth full, 401 days out. On the back in pencil, in a dead man's handwriting, "Walk in me. Tell him to smile. He won't." Ethan Walker sat on the side of that road for 45 minutes with his forehead against the steering wheel and a photograph in his hand and a dog in the passenger seat pushing her nose under his elbow over and over until he finally lifted his arm and let her in. "It's all right," he told her, which was a lie, and then it was not. He hung it in the new house that night. It was the first thing on the wall. Cole Harrison had stood outside a broken window on a Tuesday in October and said, "You got no pictures on the wall. That tells me he don't think he's staying." Ethan Walker drove a nail into a stud in his own living room in November and hung a photograph of a laughing man and stood back and looked at it. "I'm staying," he said. The years did what years do. Dale Whitmore came up in the second spring with a fence stretcher in his truck bed and did not knock, just started working on the West Line. And when Ethan came out, he said, "There's 400 yards here. That's mine to fix, and you can either help me or get out of the way." And Ethan Walker helped him, and neither man ever said one word about it afterward, and they fixed fence together every April for 11 years. Tyler Voss testified in federal court in Billings and lost his outfitter's license and moved to Wyoming and sends Ethan a Christmas card every year with nothing written in it but his name. Boone Reyes went to trade school on the state's dime, became a diesel mechanic, married a girl from Livingston, and named nothing after anybody, which Ethan considered the healthiest outcome in the entire affair. Merle Dunphy lost his primary in June by 31 points. Daniel Brooks retired at 65 and was replaced by a sheriff who had been a school teacher, which everybody said would never work, and which worked. Priya Raman sent one bill for $11,000, and when Ethan asked her why it was $11,000, when the actual number had to be 6 times that, she said, "Because that's what you had," and would not discuss it further, and came up every August for 4 days with her husband and refused to talk about law. Walt Jennings died in his sleep in the 9th year at 88 and left Ethan Walker, his hardware store, which Ethan sold to Kyle Merrick's brother for $1 and the assumption of the debt. And Ruby got old. She got old the way dogs do all at once, and then slowly gray in the muzzle by the 6th year, sleeping through thunder by the 9th. And in the 11th year, she could not do the North Bench anymore. And Ethan Walker started carrying her the last quarter mile in a pack frame. He built himself 62 pounds of buoy on the back of a 63-year-old man because she still wanted to see it. And he was not going to be the one who told her no. She died on a Tuesday in the 12th year on the porch in the afternoon with his hand on her ribs. He buried her on the North Bench where the elk come down, and he did not tell anybody for 4 days. And then Kyle Merrick found the grave while running a trail camera line and sat down beside it and cried and drove to the house and did not knock. Just walked in and sat down at the table across from Ethan Walker and said nothing at all for about an hour. That was the only funeral she got, and it was enough. By the 15th year, the preserve had 11 miles of trail and 4,000 visitors a season and a herd that Fish and Wildlife counted at 340 animals on ground that had held 11 when Ethan Walker bought it. School groups came in May. There was a display board at the trailhead with a laminated page on it that told a version of the story, and it was a boring version, and Ethan had personally insisted on every dull word of it, and there was one photograph on that board, an orange survey ribbon on a dead snag, faded almost white. The caption said, "Warnings are not threats." This one was T-tied 2 days before it mattered. Every so often, somebody came up the road wanting the other version. A podcast crew in year 6, a novelist in year 9, a young man in year 11 who said he was writing his master's thesis and who asked Ethan Walker in his own kitchen whether it was true that he had tracked them, whether the ribbons had been bait, whether a man with his training could have herded 5 people into a drainage. Ethan poured him coffee and answered him straight. "Could a man do that?" he said. "Probably. I've known men who could." "Did you know? How do you prove that?" "I don't," Ethan said. "I never could and I never will, and I stopped trying in about the 3rd year. Here's what I've got instead. There's a dispatch log with the time in it. There's a warden's camera with Tyler Voss saying I yelled at them to go back. There's a phone that never called for help, and there's a man alive in Silver Fork named Dale Whitmore who tells anybody who'll listen that he heard me tell him to go to his truck and he didn't go." The kid wrote that down. "But people still say it. People will say it after I'm dead," Ethan Walker said, "and I've made my peace with it, and I'll tell you the thing that took me the longest to learn if you want it. Please. Being believed is not the same as being right." He set the pot down. "I wanted to be believed for about 3 years. It near killed me. Then one morning I was fixing fence and it just went away because I finally understood that Rick Dunn's daughter can walk on this ground now, and Cole Harrison's clients can't, and whether the diner believes me does not change one single thing about that." Hannah Dunn came to work at the preserve in the 17th year. She was 28 by then with a wildlife biology degree from Bozeman and her mother's chin, and she came up the road in a state truck with a clipboard and got out and looked at the old man on the porch. "Mr. Walker." "Hannah, I'm supposed to do the elk count." "I know it." She stood there a second. "You knew I applied." "I wrote the letter," Ethan said, "same as I did for the other one." Hannah Dunn looked out at 700 acres of the ground her father had died on and did not cry because she had done that already years ago in a kitchen with a stranger on one knee in front of her. "My mom says to tell you she's fine," she said. "She says to tell you she's actually fine, not the other kind." "Good. She also said to ask you something, and she said you'd know why." "Go ahead." Hannah checked her clipboard like the question was on it, which it was not. "She wants to know if you ever hung anything else on the wall." Ethan Walker laughed out loud, which he did not do often. "Tell her yes," he said. "Tell her there's 11 of them now, and one of them's her husband." Hannah Dunn's head came up. "What?" "Second from the left by the door." He nodded toward the house. "It's the crew photo off the Harrison shop wall. Marion sent me the whole box in year 4, and I burned most of it and kept 4 faces. And your father's one of them, and you can go look at it right now if you want to, and take as long as you need, and I'll be out here. She was in that house for 20 minutes. When she came out, her eyes were red and her voice was steady. Why him, she said, of the whole crew? Ethan Walker stood up off the porch step and looked at her. Because he asked for the phone, he said. He lived on that mountain until he was 79. He never married, he never got rich. He got a new dog in the 13th year, a shepherd cross out of the shelter in Bozeman, with a bad ear which he had not planned, and which he did not explain to anybody, and he named her Kessler after the old man who had sold out and gone bitter to his grave. Because Ethan Walker had decided somewhere along the way that the point of a name is to remember what almost happened. He fixed fence, he filed reports, and there were fewer every year, and in the 22nd year there were none at all. He gave exactly 1 interview in his life in the 20th year to a public radio reporter in Missoula who asked him what he wanted people to understand. And Ethan Walker sat in a small studio at 72 years old and said the only thing he had ever really had to say. People keep asking me if I beat 5 men on a mountain, he said. I didn't. I want that plain. 2 of those men died because a man they were afraid of would not admit he was wrong, and a 3rd one nearly died, and a 4th one lost his fingers, and not one of them was touched by me. I never fired a shot. I never laid a hand on anybody. I stood in my own kitchen while they broke every window I owned, and I sat still, and that's the hardest thing I ever did in my life, harder than anything I did overseas, and I'd do it again. Why, the reporter asked. Because the whole time, every day, he was waiting for me to give him 10 bad seconds, Ethan said. That's all he ever needed. 10 seconds, and he'd have had my mountain and my name, and there'd be elk hunts running through that drainage for money right now. And I never gave them to him, not once in 6 months, and I want somebody out there listening who's got a bully in their life to hear that, because it's the only advice I've got, and it's free. And the boundary the fence people say that's what it was about. It was never about a fence. Ethan Walker leaned toward the microphone. A boundary is not a line on a map, and it is not a thing you own. It's the last place where a decent man tells the truth out loud when it costs him something. That's all it is. Cole Harrison spent 31 years never once being told no, and the first time it happened, he could not survive it, and he took 2 men with him, and I have thought about that every single day for 20 years. The reporter let the silence run. Mr. Walker, do you ever wish you'd bought somewhere else? And Ethan Walker, who had lost a house, a dog's health, 4 years of sleep, and every dollar he ever saved, and who had gained 900 acres of protected ground, a dead friend's photograph on a wall, and the biggest wildlife herd in 3 counties, gave his answer without 1 second of hesitation. No, he said, I bought the right mountain. He died at home on the porch on a Tuesday in October in the arms of a woman named Hannah Dunn, who had driven up because he had not answered his phone, and who was holding him when the ambulance came, and who told the paramedic in a voice that would not shake, "You be careful with him. This is Ethan Walker." They buried him on the north bench next to a dog. 911 acres of Montana carry his fence lines, and none of it carries his name because he refused it in writing 3 separate times and the trust honored it. But there is a sign at the county road, and it is the same sign, and every spring somebody repaints the letters. And this is what the mountain remembers and what it will go on remembering long after every person in this story is gone. 5 men crossed a line that had been marked, posted, photographed, and spoken out loud. 1 man stood on the right side of it and never moved. The mountain did not choose sides. It never does. It simply belonged, in the end, to the one who respected it.